I ordered a pizza from a place that doesn't exist anymore, and now it won't stop showing up on my phone. This is probably just a glitch or maybe a prank or something. I don't know. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It happened a few nights ago. I couldn't sleep and I was super hungry, like stomach growling, head throbbing kind of hungry. It was around 1:45 a.m., and of course everything around me was closed. I opened Uber Eats just to check, thinking maybe I'd get lucky with some crappy gas station place or whatever. Most of it was grayed out. But then I see this listing near the bottom. Uncle Sal's Pizza. I'd never heard of it before. No reviews, no address listed, no hours, nothing. Just this blurry picture of a slice of pepperoni pizza that looked like it was taken on a flip phone through a dirty window or something. Honestly, it looked kinda gross. But I was tired and starving and didn't care. The menu only had 3 things. 1 topping slice, $5. House special, $13. The usual slice, $9. No descriptions. Nothing else. I picked the usual slice because I don't even know. The name felt weirdly familiar. Like something I'd heard before but couldn't place. Just felt kinda personal, I guess. Anyway, I ordered it. The app said ETA 11 minutes, which made no sense at that hour, but whatever. It ended up taking like 15. I never saw a car. Never heard anyone. Just got the notification that it had been delivered. When I opened the door, the box was just there, dead center on the porch. Uber Eats had a photo of it, but the photo looked old? Like grainy and discolored, like something scanned from a printout. The box itself looked straight out of 1998, red and white checkerboard pattern, weird cartoon chef on the front. And it was kinda yellowed, like it had been in storage for years. Inside, the pizza was warmish, but clearly not fresh. The cheese had hardened in that gross way where it doesn't pull apart, just rips. The pepperoni was shriveled and crunchy on the edges. It smelled like, I don't know how to describe it. Not spoiled. Just old. Like basement pizza. But also familiar. Almost like something from when I was a kid. I ate 1 slice and tossed the rest. It wasn't even good. I just felt weird. Next morning, I go to check the listing again and it's just gone. Like it was never there. Not marked as closed. Completely vanished. Even the order in my history just said, unavailable. No name, no contact. Nothing. That creeped me out more than I want to admit. So I called my mom later that afternoon, just randomly asked, "Hey, do you remember a pizza place called Uncle Sal's?" And she went quiet for a second and was like, "Where did you hear that?" I told her it came up on Uber Eats, and I ordered from it. She got really quiet after that. Then she goes, "That place shut down when you were little." Like, little. You don't remember. Apparently, it used to be in this old strip mall not far from where we used to live. She said we went there a few times when I was a toddler. Birthday parties, stuff like that. She said it always smelled weird, even back then. Then she said something that actually made me feel sick. The owner, Sal, he killed himself in the restaurant after they shut it down. I think you were 4. They found him in the dining room. He wouldn't leave after the health department condemned the place. He hanged himself with an extension cord from one of the ceiling fans. I didn't know what to say to that. I don't remember any of it. I don't even remember the place existing. But I drove out there. I had to. It's like 15 minutes from my apartment now. The strip mall's basically dead, one of those places with boarded up windows, trash in the parking lot, and a couple stores that look like fronts for scams. And there it was. The old sign is still up. Uncle Sal's Pizza. The windows are filthy, but you can still kinda see inside. The booths are still there. One of those claw machine things in the corner. Crumpled paper napkins on the floor like it's been frozen in time. And up on the counter? A pizza box. Same design as the one I got. I didn't go in. I just left. I've felt off ever since. And here's the part that really messed me up. Just a few minutes ago, I got a notification on my phone from Uber Eats. Late night hunger? Why not reorder from Uncle Sal's Pizza? I have no idea how it got through. I deleted the app from my phone. I even turned off push notifications from everything. I don't know if it's a bug, or some marketing thing gone wrong, or something else. But the thing is, I can still smell it. That old pizza smell. Like cardboard and dust and warm pepperoni grease. And part of me, a tiny, disgusting part, actually wants to order it again. 2 days ago, we were on a field trip to a place called Mercy Farms. My friend and I are the only survivors. We got our permission slips on Monday, and we were all pretty excited. It's not often that we take a field trip before winter break. A few people in my class of 30 whispered amongst themselves. Some people asked our teacher, Mrs. Clearfield, where Mercy Farms was. None of us had ever heard of it. She explained that Mercy Farms is where the juice our school gets is made. She told us that we would be going to see the packaging plant, and at the time, that was enough to get us to settle down. My parents thought that it was a little short notice, getting a permission slip only a few days before the trip. But I didn't care. See, I got hurt during a hockey game and had nothing else to do. So while I wasn't excited to be going to a farm, I was excited to spend the day having at least a little fun. On the day of the field trip, Mrs. Clearfield informed us that we would all be assigned seating partners. I won't lie, I was irritated. I was hoping to sit with a teammate during the trip, but instead I got stuck with Grace Redacted, a football cheerleader who wouldn't give me the time of day if I offered her money. I always got the impression that she thought that she was too good for our small town. The look she gave me when we found out that we would be sitting together was hilarious. But any inkling of wanting to laugh was knocked out of me when I heard our teacher say that the ride was going to be nearly 9 hours. Once we got on the bus, Grace asked me if she could sit on the inside of the seat. I shrugged and let her. At least that way, I could talk to people around me. For a few hours, that was enough for me. But eventually the bus started to settle down, and I turned to watch the window with Grace. We were surrounded by a forest on all sides. As we drove, I swear that we passed maybe 20 different owls. But perhaps it was a trick that the trees were playing on me. Grace was fixated on the window, though. Does this seem weird to you? Grace eventually whispered to me as the forest opened up into a cornfield. Yeah, I said honestly as I heard someone speaking ahead of me. Are we almost there? Ben asked Mrs. Clearfield. We will get there when we get there. Mrs. Clearfield said without any hesitation. Okay, but we have been at it for 5 hours. Can we get a bathroom break? Ben asked, clearly irritated. No, the bus driver said. It was the first time I heard him speak the whole trip. I leaned forward to watch the bus driver in the large mirror that hung over his head. The bus driver had short brown hair and a strong jaw with a small beard. He wore a black uniform with letters on a patch that I couldn't make out. As I watched him in the mirror, his eyes slowly met mine. We made direct eye contact, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I quickly tucked my head back behind the seat and went back to watching the forest with Grace. More of my classmates got antsy though. One of my teammates, Charlie, eventually got up around hour 7. I couldn't believe we had been in this bus for 7 hours straight, driving through corn. I could tell that Grace was getting antsy too, or perhaps she was just uneasy. She squirmed in her seat and tapped her leg around this time. We will be there soon, Charlie. Take a seat and don't get up again or else you will get a 3-month detention, and no, I'm not kidding. Mrs. Clearfield snapped at him. She sounded so angry. Charlie quickly sat down, and I turned to watch the window with Grace. Grace. I whispered to her as I watched one of the scarecrows in the corn. It swayed slowly in the wind. Yeah. She whispered back as she turned to meet me. Her green eyes seemed to be filled with fear and unease. Are you scared? I asked her. Yes. Grace answered honestly. I am too, I said as I looked down at my hands in my jacket. Grace swept her blonde hair behind her ear, and as she did this, something moved behind her. I swear it moved. A scarecrow turned to watch the window. My eyes twitched and my eyes narrowed. I went into fight mode. It's hard to explain just how it made me feel. When Grace turned to see what I was looking at, her eyes widened, and she moved to the side, nearly pushing me off the seat. I could hear people whispering about the scarecrows for the next 30 minutes. By the time I looked down at my arm, I noticed Grace holding my sleeve, as if I were the only physical object in the bus. By hour 8, I was fed up. Every question, comment, and concern directed at Mrs. Clearfield was met with an increasingly condescending attitude that left a bad taste in my mouth. I had never seen Grace look so anxious. She was bouncing her right leg and fidgeting with her hands. The two girls in the seat next to us were doing similar motions. Why were we all feeling so uneasy? Mrs. Clearfield? I finally got the nerve to ask as I stood up and looked at her from my seat. I could feel my classmates looking at me. The cornfield around us felt all-consuming and endless. Images of the scarecrows flickered in the back of my mind. Yes, Travis. Mrs. Clearfield responded without turning her head. How much longer? I asked softly. I was trying to keep my attitude hidden, trying to be as respectful as possible. 30 minutes. Mrs. Clearfield responded with a hum. The bus driver looked at me in the mirror again, and I quickly sat down. I was going to say something to Grace, but instead, I watched the scenery around us change. Instead of the cornfield, we were finally seeing buildings. The town looked like something out of an old movie, really vintage. The first building we passed looked like a small grocery store. It had 2 large M's on the top of it. A sign that said Mercury Mart. I felt my stomach rumble. I hadn't bothered to eat anything the whole trip, but I did have my backpack with me. We were told to bring lunch. I couldn't bring myself to sit down and open it, though. There were smaller houses too. They were kind of pretty in a way. Each one was painted blue, white, and sometimes red or yellow. We passed a black house with a large fence. It caught Grace's attention, and her eyes followed it as we drove by. Next, we passed a movie theater, one like you'd see in old movies. I'll admit, it was cool looking. Had a man working the ticket booth in the front and everything. I couldn't make out any of the now playing posters. We passed a diner. The checkered floors looked cool, and honestly, the food smelled amazing. I wanted to leave my seat and tell the bus driver to stop. Finally, we passed a sign that said Camp Mercy Hollows, pointing towards more corn. I wondered if the camp had the same vintage appearance as the rest of the town. As we went further, we drove by an elementary school with various cartoon characters painted on the windows. The paint was faded and looked like it was melting. The way the paint slid down the window made me uneasy. That's when I noticed no other cars were passing us. There was no one on the sidewalk, though I could make out some people in the stores. As soon as we passed the middle school, I felt Grace grab my wrist again. Mercy Middle School, home of the angels. The building looked mostly run down, and we could see some of the lights on inside, but I couldn't make out anyone inside. The parking lot was empty too. I could see what I assumed to be the high school in the distance. We didn't get close enough for me to see the details. As we followed our classmates, I could hear something moving in the corn around us. I figured it was just a bird, but everything around us made me feel uneasy. I think that my body was trying to tell me something, and I know that sounds crazy. The smell coming from the stable was awful, but it didn't smell like manure or anything. Instead, a pungent copper odor wafted out of the barely open doors. I tried to keep my eyes on the chipped white paint that lined the doors. I could hear Grace gag next to me. I turned back to see what Mrs. Clearfield would do. How was she reacting to all of this? Her expression was relatively normal as she ushered everyone into the dark building. If I were going to run now, she would be able to stop me. As soon as the last of my classmates went inside, the doors closed and the lights roared to life. There were no animals in here, and since I wasn't in the front of the group, I couldn't see what was making people back up. Before I could process anything, the whole stable broke out in screams. I was nearly trampled. I took Grace by the arm as quickly as possible and pushed her to the side of the group. The screaming intensified as we moved. It was all-consuming. As soon as we hit the right wall of the building, I could see why. One of my classmates, Tony, I think his name was, stumbled back before his body hit the floor. He had a pitchfork sticking out of his chest. He took 2 small steps back before coughing up some blood. Seconds later, his body fell backward, slamming off the wooden floor. Have you ever been so terrified that you can't breathe? That's how I was feeling. No screaming, no crying, instead I felt frozen. I swear I saw my life flash before my eyes. Sasha went down after that. The man who spoke to us prior struck her down with a scythe. It was one swift motion, splitting her neck like it was made out of fresh bread. Blood sprayed out of her like a sprinkler. We have to run. Grace snapped at me as she took my wrist. She didn't have to drag me to get me to follow her. We followed the rest of my classmates to the back of the stable. I swear that I had never moved so fast. As soon as we reached the door and the air hit us, I thought that we were going to get away. If we could just make it back to town, we could call the police. Someone would help us, I was so sure of it. Some people screamed in front of us, the screaming turning into a deep, wet gurgle. The sound you would hear if someone were drowning. We heard a splash, and one of the girls next to us let out a blood-curdling scream. It was unlike anything I had ever heard. My head snapped to the left to see what was going on. She had an arrow sticking out of her shin. Someone was shooting arrows at us. We were not going to get away like this. I had to think fast to buy Grace and me some time. I pushed forward and let the arrows hit my classmates. I felt awful about this, awful enough that I could feel myself crying. It was just a few tears, but as the terror caught up with me, it became harder to hold them back. Eventually, the ground gave out beneath us. I didn't let Grace go. I could feel her hand tighten around my hand. The liquid we fell into wasn't water. We were consumed by a copper smell, and before I knew what was happening, I could taste it. Blood. I poked my head out of the blood pit with Grace, just to get a glimpse of the world outside. I caught a glimpse of someone kicking bodies into the pit. I watched Grace move one of our classmates over to hide under. I grabbed the closest body to copy her, but it wasn't a classmate in my hand. It was Mrs. Clearfield. We sat in the blood pit for what felt like hours. Eventually, I moved Mrs. Clearfield to the side and emerged fully. There was no one around that I could hear, and the sun was raised higher than it was when we fell in. The smell that consumed me made me want to puke, though I knew that if we made too much noise, we would be killed. I slowly reached out of the pit and dragged myself out. Again, I had to fight puking, so I turned my head to help Grace out of the pit. The image of my dead classmates will forever be burned into my mind. I could feel it again, tears barely pushing down my cheeks. The blood on my face felt like it was holding my tears in place. Grace pushed her head out of the blood, fully, and her blonde hair was nearly unrecognizable. Her whole appearance felt like it had changed. The blood poured off her face, barely sticking to her skin and hair. As soon as her face came out fully, I could tell that she had been crying too. I reached forward to take her hand, as we had done so many times today. As I took her hand, I could hear a door swing open and slam shut. I pulled her out so quickly that I thought that I might break her arm or something. Stop! A woman screamed at us. I tilted my head up and watched as the woman came sprinting across the field. I felt frozen, like my legs had stopped working. I could feel my body start shaking, my lip quivered, and my eye twitched. This was it, I thought. This is how I die. Run! Grace screamed as she tugged me, willing me to move. I turned and ran with her. With no other choice, we went running right into the cornfield. The town should be this way. I screamed as I tried to get us to run towards the road. That's when I heard it. The corn was rustling. Someone was behind us. I couldn't help but let out a scream. I could hear Grace panting as we ran, no matter how fast we pumped our arms, we couldn't speed up. I heard whatever it was getting closer, and that's when I felt it. Pain. Visceral, blood-chilling, heart-stopping pain. Blood ran down my back, and my legs buckled. I let out a scream so loud I knew everyone and everything in the area would be on us. Grace turned around, and I watched as her face turned pale as snow. Even caked in blood, I could see the terror she was wearing. I quickly turned around and involuntarily cocked my head. I was expecting to see a person, but this was no man. It was a scarecrow, its face elongated, the sack that it wore on its head became outstretched in a horrifying grimace. Hay stuck out of its arms and legs. Its right arm dripped with my blood. It had lashed me. The checkered shirt the creature was wearing was caked in dry blood. Its jeans were tattered, so we could see it was completely made of hay. I screamed and slammed my leg into the monster before scurrying to my feet. "Run faster!" I screamed to Grace as we pushed through the corn. My heart was beating so fast that I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Monsters aren't real, I kept trying to tell myself. But that wasn't true. They're real, and one is going to kill us. I turned my head back a little to see if it was gaining on us. The scarecrow ran with its legs going as high as possible. Its arms pumped with such power that I was surprised that there wasn't a human inside the suit. "Grace! It's picking up speed!" I screamed in horror. "Shit!" Grace gasped. She was running out of breath. I could hear it, and before I could reach over to help her, the scarecrow slammed into her back with enough force to send her flying forward. I reached my hand forward to catch her and found myself tripping and falling, landing on concrete. Sweet, beautiful concrete. I pulled my scraped bloody hands from the concrete and looked at Grace. She had slammed right into a parked car. Fresh blood pooled from her nose, and tears streamed from her eyes. Seeing her cry, it made me mad. I've lived on this street my entire life. I'm 20 now. Same cracked pavement, same flickering street lamp outside my bedroom window. Nothing ever really changes here, it'll always be just another paper town. Except I started noticing something I wish I hadn't. His name is Mr. Bell. He lives in the gray house at the end of the cul-de-sac. He's been there since 1994, a full 6 years before I was even born. My mom told me he moved in alone, kept to himself, seemed polite enough, but she always got a strange feeling around him. I didn't think much of it growing up, but even when I was a kid, I noticed he never looked any different. He always wore long black coats, even in the middle of summer. His skin was pale, like he never stepped outside in the daylight. His yard stayed perfect, but I never once saw him mow it or hire anyone to do it. No one ever parked in his driveway. No one ever visited. After my mom died this spring, I started going through her stuff. She was big on keeping records, photos, journals, grocery lists, everything. I found a photo album from when I was little. There's this picture from my 3rd birthday. I'm in the yard wearing a plastic tiara and eating cake. My dad is holding the camera, and in the background, standing near the fence, is Mr. Bell. Same face. Same coat. He looks exactly the same now as he did in that photo. Not similar, it's his spitting image to this day. He's identical to it. That's when I really started paying attention, honestly. Mr. Bell's blinds are always closed. His trash cans are never out. No packages, not even mail. I knocked on his door last week just to see what would happen. He opened it swiftly, like he was already standing there. The inside of his house was completely dark. I couldn't see past the doorway. Mr. Bell smiled at me in a way that looked forced. His eyes were dead and his brows hung low to them. Mr. Bell told me he was very sorry about my mom. I sighed, nodded and said, "I miss her," which followed with him saying, "I loved her mind, it was quite beautiful." You don't find that in a lot of people these days. Shame. Oh, such a shame. I'm so sorry, child. I thanked him. He shut his door softly and I hurried home. Thoughts began to implode in my mind. Why did I even do that? What the hell was he talking about? He hasn't spoken to my mother in years, but it's nice he at least said that. We never really talked until then. How would he know anything about her mind though? That night, I went through more of her things. I found one of her journals. She had written about him a few times. I just thought he was the neighbor, but knowing Mom, she probably had a hard time after Dad left and Mr. Bell must have been a thought for her. I unstuck a page. Bell stopped by this time. He brought me tea. Smelled metallic and old. Said it helps with dreams. I didn't throw it out. He asked if he could come in, to look around. I told him no. He didn't blink. I don't think he has to. Matt was pretty mad at me for accepting the tea. The fighting is getting rough again. I just hope Lily doesn't hear us arguing. I heard them argue countlessly. Poor Mom. Dad was a piece of shit and it wasn't her fault. Then a few pages later, Mom continued. Saw Belle standing at the tree line out back. Just standing. Watching. No footprints in the dirt. Am I being weird? People watching is kind of fun and this guy, he's just so strange. It's been hard without the job and Matt is always at work. He's been working such late hours. Shaking my head and giggling a bit, I turned to the next page. The woods behind our house are dense. I've never liked walking back there, even during the day. I should though, maybe see it out for myself and take Lily. It's almost summer break. A few more months. I hope I get a good job by then, that way I can take Matt and Lily somewhere nice. Finally be the one to pay for something. Another entry. 2 nights ago, Matt got up quickly to report to work. Welding is no joke. I couldn't watch any TV, my mind just wasn't for it that night. I tried that tea Mr. Bell gave me and sat in the living room on one of our lazy boys. The clock clicked and it was 2:46 a.m. I saw Bell walk out of his house. He didn't lock the door. Didn't even shut it. He stepped into the dark like he was stepping into water. His movements were strange. Too smooth. He didn't walk, exactly. More like he floated. Maybe I was just seeing things? What the fuck? Looking up from this page, I opened my window and peered out to breathe and get myself ready to read more because I knew soon she'd talk about how Dad left us. As if it was a scene out of a horror movie itself, Mr. Bell looked up at me. It was dusk and he had just stepped outside. He's always out late. He stood motionless and stared. I dropped to the floor so fast I scraped my hands. When I looked again, he was gone. Last night, I couldn't sleep. I began to start watching him myself. At 3:12 a.m., I saw movement in the woods. Something fast, like a shadow that didn't belong there. Then I saw Mr. Bell, standing still, staring at someone in front of him. It was a woman. Looked like she was my age. She was barefoot, in pajamas. Her face was blank, like she wasn't fully awake. He stepped toward her, and his jaw opened wider than it should have. His teeth were long and yellow, like something that didn't evolve with the rest of the body. I gasped. I couldn't bring myself to watch any longer. I hurried upstairs and shut my windows, blinds down. The scene was horrific. My breathing grew heavy and I couldn't catch a breath for the life of me. I felt so stupid. So dumb. Why didn't I just pack up the house earlier this week? Why did I have to stay and read her journals? Now I'm in this situation. Curiosity kills the cat, I guess. My mind raced. Zombies. In this economy? No way. You have to be kidding me. What do I do? All those Nosferatu-obsessed teenagers online would probably think, OMG. Vampire moment. It wasn't. Mr. Bell looked like a predator unhinging its jaw. Saliva dripping from each end, and his eyes were black and with no life dancing through them. His long unkempt nails clutched against her arm. She didn't even scream. She just dropped to the ground like the strings holding her up had been cut. It was like she was in a trance before he took her. God. What do I do? I didn't sleep at all. I ended up calling the police and told them I saw something suspicious in the woods. They showed up and walked around for a while, but there was no sign of a struggle. No prints. No broken branches. No girl. Only one thing stood out. A deer, dead under the trees. It looked almost mummified. No blood. Its eyes were wide open, like it saw what happened. I don't know what Mr. Bell is, but he's not human. And I think he knows I've figured it out. This morning, someone left a gift on my front porch. The tea my mom used to drink all the time. I didn't drink it. I poured it down the drain. Here's my advice: don't watch your neighbors at night. You never know what they do. It's not worth it. At the outset, I should tell you I'm a thief. Not a classless smash-and-grab guy or a lowly pickpocket. Those require no planning or strategy beyond, move quickly and be ready to run. I'm a fourth-generation cat burglar. I'm very good at my job. If everything goes right, you don't notice I've been there for weeks. If ever. I understand most people find this line of work deplorable. I'm okay with that. I could go on and on about how the system steals from us all the time and how the rich use their ill-gotten gains to subjugate us and give you the whole, I'm really a Robin Hood type figure. But I will spare you all that rationality. I'm a thief because I'm good at it and was raised in a culture that values it. There are other reasons, but it's not worth getting into them. To be a cat burglar isn't just about breaking into a house and cleaning out a safe. That's part of the job, sure, but like an iceberg, most of it remains hidden from view. My father used to tell me, being a thief is being prepared to be bored out of your mind. He wasn't wrong about that, anyway. Wrong about a lot of other things. But I digress. Once I narrow in on an address, I have to sit it. That sounds easy, but it's not. It's boring. Clean the garage, boring. Waiting in line at the DMV, boring. But it has to be done. Veg before ice cream, boy. Veg before ice cream. Dad again. He told me this while housing a sleeve of Fig Newtons before dinner. Much to my chagrin, he was right. Again. Outside of watching a house for hours on end, there are so many dozens of other things to keep track of. Has anybody made you while you're casing the place? What hours do the servants work? What's the best way onto the property? How do I get in and out of the house with little chance of being caught? Each question needs to be answered beforehand. Finally, the big question, what's the security situation? A lot of these McMansions come pre-built with high-tech security features in place for the first year. That's when the lower-cost prices disappear. Most people, even millionaires, will cut off services at that point. They keep the signs, sure, but not the actual equipment. That's gone like disco and ain't ever coming back. Why? There are two major reasons. First, the rich live in a bubble and don't believe anyone can get to them. Money enables hubris. Second, rich people are the cheapest people in the world. Why pay for the real thing when a chintzy look-alike will do? Capitalism's beating heart is to make the most money by spending the least amount of it. The illusion of security is cheaper than actual security. The night of the robbery, I felt good. Prepared. I'd watched. Noted everyone's daily schedule. Marked my entrance and exits. Knew where the primary bedroom was located. I even wore my lucky shirt. Fat lot of good that did. I waited until I saw the Uber leave and then started my half-hour timer. It's been my experience that the help empties out not long after the boss leaves. Cats away and all that. As if on cue, the servants bolted as soon as the Uber was out of sight. I still waited the 30 minutes. Like a shitty magic spell, stragglers can transform into witnesses. Seeing none, I made my way onto the property. The most tense moment of any heist is when you're about to break in. Even in all black, even in the dark, there's still a chance someone could see you. A nosy neighbor. A dog walker. A panhandler. Anyone. Time works against you. Too slow, you draw attention. Too fast, you make mistakes. A steady hand and a calm demeanor are key here. I have those in spades. This is also the moment that you can't plan for. Did you miss bars on the window? Are there more than one lock on the door? Did someone stay home? Is the alarm system on? Are there cameras rolling? It's a gamble that can cost you your freedom, your life. It's also a rush. I've discovered that, most of the time, upper floor windows in McMansions are unlocked. The thinking goes, well, we have several layers of security before anyone could get to that point. Why bother? I get it. It's a mistake, but one most people would make. Hanging on the outside downspout, I sighed in relief. This window was unlocked. I pushed open the window and climbed in. My moccasins softly touched the floor, making no noise. They're not the most durable in the wild, but inside, they are worth their weight in gold. No tread to ID. No noise on carpets. Comfortable as all hell. The room was dark, and I had no desire to change that. I keep a tiny penlight in my pocket for that reason. I've become so accustomed to seeing the world in the tiny circle of light that my eyes quickly attune to the dark. A cat in every sense. I assumed the truly valuable things, wills, bank account information, holy grails, would be in a safe. I don't crack safes. Well, not in people's homes, anyway. Too complicated. Too messy. I was after jewels. Thanks to my extensive history, I knew where I'd find them. Even in the dark, you could tell how obscenely large the walk-in closet was. It wasn't even fair to call it a walk-in closet, more like a studio apartment for clothes. 3 of the walls were lined with suits and dresses that may have been worn once. Maybe twice. Some still had tags on them. The last wall was dedicated to shoes. Red-bottom Louboutins and rare Jordans as far as the eye, or penlight, could see. But what caught my attention was the makeup vanity carved into the wall like Petra in the Shara Mountains. More specifically, the 3 jewelry boxes sitting there. I moved to them like a zealot to the temple. This was what I came for. My haul would keep me in the black for a while, unless it was costume jewelry. The cocktease of stones, Dad would say. I pried open the first lid and smiled. Dozens of bejeweled brooches shimmered before me, like the hundreds of eyes of some mythological monster. All shapes and sizes. Most ugly but authentic. The genuine article has a certain touch to them. A heft. These were legit. I plucked a few from the bottom of the box and placed them into my bag. My fingers found something that had an odd shape. I pulled it out to get a closer look. A triangle inside a pentagon. It was on the small side but was full of diamonds. Valuable. Very. But something felt wrong about it. I dropped it back in. I brought a new game. The 4 of us crowded around the folding table in a dingy basement. Somehow, Nadia, Rupert, Todd, and I had managed to stay friends past our college days. Even though we were all graduated, working professionals with mortgages, and some of us children, every Tuesday night, we still crammed together in the basement of Nadia's childhood home to play board games. When our 5th member, Paul, was here, we'd continue our D&D campaign, but he was gone more and more on business trips. Todd pulled the lid off the board game. "What is it?" I asked. "No idea," Todd said. "That's part of the fun. Found it at the back of my parents' game closet. Which means we have to take half an hour to figure out the rules." Nadia snorted. "It doesn't look so bad," Todd said. Already, he was taking the board out, unfolding it, and centering it on the table. He placed 4 tokens, 1 for each of us, on the starting line and a stack of cards in the center. "It doesn't," I agreed. "Geez, when is this game from? It's so faded." "Messy Hands," Rupert read from the lid of the box. "It looks like some simplified version of life. We sure we don't want to play Catan?" "It will be fun," Todd insisted, an edge of annoyance in his tone. Not surprising. The 4 of us, 5, including Paul, had been friends for years. We were masters at forgiving each other by now, which also meant we were masters at getting on each other's nerves. Fights were common, but we always resolved them. "Let's give it a chance," I said before a fight could break out. Todd spent less than a minute scanning the rules. Okay, pretty simple. We just take turns flipping over a card and doing what they say on the back. Nadia, ladies first. She shrugged and nabbed a card. She read it, then set it on the table where we could all read it. Do a jumping jack to advance 1 space. Okay. She giggled. So it's like some lame version of truth or dare? You gotta do it, I said. She did and moved her token forward once. I flipped over a card next. Lick your neighbor's hand to advance 2 spaces. 2 spaces. Nadia said. Not fair. Her tone was uncaring though. None of us seemed to care much about this kid's game. We were doing it to appraise Todd, though even he was looking skeptical now. No harm in playing along to make him less embarrassed, though, so I dropped my face dramatically and touched my tongue to Rupert's hand. Disgusting! He laughed. I pushed my token 1 past Nadia's. Rupert was next. Tell a secret to advance 2 spaces. Draw again. Oh, he said. You're right, this is like truth or dare. You're stalling, Todd said. He rolled his eyes. Fine. You know how I said your new haircut looks good? Yeah. Well, it's all uneven in the back. He flipped another card. Tell a bigger secret to advance 1 more space. Draw again. What the? Rupert looked at Todd. Did you set this up? Todd shrugged. It was odd to get those cards one after another, and then again, we hadn't actually shuffled them. They'd probably come like that. Well, okay, Rupert said. Let's see. In high school, I was in the same lit class my brother took 2 years before. He'd given me his old computer with all his old files, so I would just turn in his same essays for homework. Nadia oohs, and we all laugh. It sounded like something Rupert would have done. He's always been the most amoral of us, to say the least. He flips his 3rd card. Tell your biggest secret to advance 1. Again, Rupert looked up at Todd. Okay, not funny anymore. I swear I didn't put that there. Okay, well, I'm done. You take your turn. Todd reached for his card, but his hand jerked back. It shocked me. What? Rupert asked. I'm serious, the cards shocked me. That's ridicule, and Nadia started, but her hand jerked back too when she touched them. Rupert touched one. Nothing happened. You guys are hilarious. Curious, I tapped the pile next, with the very edge of my pinky. Intense electricity shot up my arm, into my shoulder, and down my legs. I sprang back, my chair nearly tipping. We all looked at each other. Nobody was smiling anymore. We were all looking at each other. It isn't our turn, I said. Hesitantly, Rupert flipped the next card. Tell your biggest secret. I'm out. Red-faced, he snatched his coat from the back of the chair and stormed for the basement door. When he got there, he swore. What is this? We rushed over. He was straining against the clearly locked basement door. Why was he so angry? I'm sick of this game, he screamed, and before any of us could react, he kicked at the flimsy basement door, splintering it. He threw the door open to reveal a wall. The one way out was entirely sealed, as if it had been that way for years. We all stared. I swear I don't know what's going on, Todd said. Rupert stormed past us to the window. He climbed on a chair and shoved it open, but even from my spot, I could see the window was walled in too. We spent minutes exploring the basement for a way out, but it was entirely, unexplainably sealed off. None of our cell phones worked either. Messy hands, Nadia whispered finally. I think we have to finish the game before it lets us out. I'm not doing that, Rupert insisted. Why not? Asked Todd. Come on, I don't want to be trapped in here, just because you can't tell us a dumb secret. Yeah, why? I asked. What's the secret? What, we all asked, over and over, what couldn't he tell us? Finally, Rupert exploded. I'm cheating on Rachel. Okay. Happy. We all gawked. Rachel was his wife of 5 years. They had a kid together. We liked Rachel. Rupert was already trying at the basement door again, but the wall was still there, solid as before. We had to keep playing. Todd went next, trembling. Point at your least favorite friend to advance to. Everybody close your eyes, he instructed us. We did. Okay, he said after a few seconds, and moved his piece forwards. Even if we hadn't seen who he'd pointed at, it surprised me how quickly he'd chosen. Nadia was next. Do another jumping jack to advance 1. Not all of them were bad, not nearly as bad as Rupert's first turn. We went one by one, doing whatever things the game said. From then on, if we had to confess something distasteful, the rest of us would follow Todd's example and plug our ears. For one turn I had to strip completely down, but the others all closed their eyes until I was dressed again. Slowly, the cards got worse. There were still the occasional freebies. For some reason jumping jacks kept popping up for Nadia, but overall the tasks became less harmless. Cut 6 inches from your hair to advance 1. Nadia teared up. Her hair wasn't long to begin with. 6 inches would make it practically a pixie cut. She took nearly an hour to work up the nerve. She tried screaming at the sealed-up door and failed over and over to connect to the non-existent Wi-Fi. We didn't coerce her, but eventually, she grabbed a pair of scissors, in tears, and seared off most of her hair. It was nearly 8 a.m. now. Our families would be wondering where we were. My turn. Draw blood to advance 1. Draw again. The draw against were never a good sign. I used a box cutter to poke at my finger until a line of red appeared. Draw more to advance 1. Draw again. Wonderful. Just great. I used the box cutter on my thigh this time. When I tried to pick up another card, though, it shocked me. I cut again, until blood was dripping onto my socks. Draw more to advance 1. From somebody else. There is a clock beneath your skin. Hi Dad. The man's face was lined but still handsome, his eyes warm and welcoming as his mouth spread into a bright, even-toothed smile. Hello there, Dolly. It's so good. He broke off in a deep bark of a laugh. What am I doing? Give me a hug. I smiled at him and then we embraced. It was awkward at first, but then it turned into something like a warm and comforting hug. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. Was this the right thing? I'd felt so certain before, but now I wasn't as sure. Pulling back, he put his arm around my shoulders and ushered me into their house. Mary, Dolly is here, hun. A woman's voice lilted from a distant room. Be right out. Taking me into the living room, he gestured for me to sit down on the sofa. Can I get you anything? A drink or a snack? Or if you want, you can stay for dinner tonight. I felt myself flushing a little. Oh, no, I'm okay. I appreciate it. I have somewhere to be later, and I don't want to impose. The man frowned slightly, his eyes looking sad. You can't impose, honey. We're your parents. I know it may not feel like that, what with how you were raised and all, but it's still true. I smiled awkwardly at him. I appreciate that. And I get what you're saying. This is all, just a lot for me. So maybe it's something we build up to. He nodded and was about to say more when she entered the room. She had to be at least 20 years older than me, but she could have been my slightly older sister just by looking at her. Throwing a smiling backward glance at her husband, she rushed over to me and gave me a big hug. Oh, doll. We've missed you so much. She leaned back to look me in the face, tears in her eyes. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. There's been such a hole in our life without you here. Swallowing, I nodded. Yeah, I felt like it was time. Returning my nod, she sat down next to me. We've been waiting and hoping since you turned 18. Her eyes widened as she put her hand on my arm. That's not a criticism or guilt trip. We understand that you probably grew up with a very dim view of us. The state wouldn't let us contact you until you were an adult, giving you to that woman for all your formative years, no doubt filling your head with, hun, don't get worked up now. Shelby is her family. The only mother she's ever really known. You speaking ill of her won't bring us closer together. He shifted his gaze to me. Dolly, you have to understand, we don't blame you or the government or even Shelby, not really. We know what it looked like back then. My mother shook her head violently. Bigotry is what it was. Ignorance. They claimed we were going to kill you. That the ritual was, she snorted, some kind of satanic bullshit. Turning back to me, tears were spilling down her cheeks now. We weren't going to harm a hair on your precious head. You believe that, don't you? I shifted uncomfortably and ran my tongue along the plastic molded against the roof of my mouth. I mean, I have heard stuff, but would I be here now if I didn't want to at least give you a chance? The man leaned forward, smiling again. That's very gracious of you. Very open-minded. And it's all we ask. His lips tightened slightly. And speaking of Shelby, how is she? Is she okay with you doing this? I sucked in a shaky breath. Actually, she's dead. Died last month. The woman gave my arm a squeeze. Well, I had my problems with her, as you can tell, but I am sorry for your loss. Squinting, she caught my eye. Was she a good mother to you? Did she raise you well? I nodded. She was, yeah. Nobody's perfect, but she was good to me. Always looked out for me. Dolly, if you're reading this, then I'm dead. That sounds dramatic, like a line from a bad movie, but it's still true. And truth is the point of this letter mostly. I could waste time and words telling you how much you mean to me, how I think you saved me, at least as much as I could be saved. But hopefully our time together has shown you how much I love you, and if it hasn't, well, a posthumous letter won't be the thing to do it. So instead, this letter will focus on the truth. I've always been honest with you, partially because when the time came, as it now has, I wanted you to know you could trust me to tell you the truth. Because while I've always been honest with you, I've also always made clear there were things you were not ready to know. For the longest time I have tried to find some other way to resolve this, something that wouldn't require you to know the worst parts of this or put you at risk. Unfortunately, I've come to the conclusion that there is no other way to protect you than to tell you the rest and put you in danger. Because there is a clock hidden beneath your skin. It has been there most of your life, and I can hear it winding down, the ticks growing sluggish, the talks unsteady and unsure. If it stops before we stop this, you will be utterly lost in a way that would make death seem like an endless blessing. Therefore, we should erase the clock that has been placed in you. And the path to doing that is hard but very simple. You must kill your parents. Tell us about yourself. My father grinned at me. I admit we've done a little internet snooping to find out what we could, but there's so much more we want to know. Glancing between them, I gave a tentative smile. Sure, like what? My mother leaned closer to me. Well, you're at university, right? What you been studying? I shrugged non-committally. A bunch of things, really. I love English classes. That and philosophy. Not sure what I'm actually going to do when I'm done though. The man chuckled. We were the same way when we were your age. Casting about, full of passion but lacking clarity and direction. He looked past me to his wife, his smile widening. But that all came with time. I nodded. Yeah, I'm sure it did. I mean I'm sure it will. For me. The woman put her hand back, this time on my leg. You're thinking about it, aren't you? I glanced at her, slightly bewildered. Looking back at my father, I saw a dark cloud of irritation growing in his face. Leave her be, March. She's doing us a kindness coming to visit. Stop pressuring her. Mary shook her head at him, but her eyes never left mine. No, I can see it. She thinking about what we did to her. She thinks we're monsters. I frowned. No, I didn't say that. I do want to know more about it. And I glanced between them. Are you still in that cult? My father shot a hard look at my mother before turning back to me. It's a fair question, Dolly. And while to call it a cult would be somewhat inaccurate and reductive, I won't quibble over semantics. It was a group we were a part of, and that we have not been a part of for quite some time. Since you were taken from us, as a matter of fact. She gave my leg a hard squeeze. And we are so sorry for everything you went through. Losing us for so many years. Being raised by that woman. She let out a small, pretty sigh. And yes, for taking your eye teeth. My father sucked in a small breath as he studied me a moment. You did know then that we took them in the ritual. I nodded, tears forming in the corners of my eyes. I did. Did you remember it, or did she tell you? I glanced up at him. She told me. His face was unreadable. What else did she tell you about it? About us? I shrugged. Not a ton. Growing up, she told me you were both in a cult. That she figured out what was going on enough to call the police and interrupt some ritual. That as your aunt, she was my closest living relative and managed to get custody pretty quick. Then she adopted me the next year. And you both went to prison for a few months and then were back out on long-term probation. That you couldn't contact me until your sentences ran out or I turned 18 and initiated it. But a lot of it, she kept telling me there were things I didn't need to know. He was studying me now like a cat pondering a small bird. Did she say she figured it out or that she knew? That she was part of this cult herself? Pushing my tongue against the back of my teeth, I forced myself to meet his gaze. She said she was part of it. That she changed her mind after the ritual started, after she heard me screaming. She called 911 and then slipped away. My mother snorted. She betrayed us and wants to make it sound like she did something noble. I'm sorry, honey, but I'm very glad she's dead. I half expected my father to snap at her, but he was still focused on me with his lamplight stare. Finally he nodded and smiled again. I feel like what you said is the truth. I'd have known if you were lying, and that would have really disappointed us. I nodded, hands clutched and trembling in my lap. I'm glad you. What did they do about your teeth? I stopped, startled by my mother's sudden question. What? Your eye teeth. They aren't missing, but they are a bit darker than the rest. She pushed a bit closer and squinted at my mouth. What did they put in there? A partial. I've had a partial since Shelby got me. They couldn't do anything permanent while I was still growing so much. I'm supposed to go in to get fitted with ceramic implants this summer. She beamed at me. That'll be lovely, dear. She looked past me. Won't it, honey? Oh yes. That's just the thing. I expected him to be smiling when I looked in his direction, but his face was still stony. Another question I have though, if you don't mind. My heart was pounding so loud it took me a second to make out what he was actually saying. I hoped they didn't notice my delay or just chalked it up to nervousness. Either way, I was in it now. I just had to be careful. Yeah, sure. He leaned forward in his seat toward me. Did she tell you to come here? I'd like to tell you I'm not to blame for what happened to you. Not because I want to lie to you, but because I want so desperately for it to be true. But the truth is that my nephew and that thing he calls his wife would never have been able to correctly execute the ritual without my instruction. Yes, I had an attack of conscience and called the police, but it was too late to stop it. The methods I'd laid out granted boons to all three of us as part of the ritual and bargain, and I could feel my reward flowing through me, even as I lied to the 911 operator about everything but where you were and who had you. I left that night before they brought you out, and while I still heard your cries, the fact that I didn't want to be there to see it should have been warning enough. Maybe it was, and yet a part of me still planned all of this, keeping the knowledge I had gained while still forging some illusory path to redemption by raising you and keeping you away from them. I don't know myself anymore, because I'm not the same as I was then in many ways. Time and my love for you have softened some sharp edges while creating new ones. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I have to avoid sentimentality and get to the point. The point is that the three of us, along with a few inconsequential hangers-on that got nothing but criminal records, made a deal with a being from another dimension. A place called Incarnata. This creature is not a demon, per se, though depending on your perspective, that may come down to semantics. It is a deal-maker and a trickster, however, often working within the framework of trading for something of value, something you love. In a sane world, parents giving their child to this thing would work fine, as they would love their child. For myself at the time, and for those two, we had little interest in or attachment to you. That's where my clever second method for imbuing you with value to this thing came in. There is magic, very old, primal magic, that relies on suffering. The ritual I constructed required a token sacrifice up front, your 2 eye teeth. That, among other things done and said, set the contract between us and it. The idea being that, over the next 20 years or so, you would be made to suffer terribly, building up a great reservoir of pain, of potential power to be tapped. This would make you very valuable when your time, your clock, ran out and you were collected. I put a kink in that plan by having you taken from them. It wouldn't have been much of an obstacle by itself, but they are afraid of me and don't fully appreciate how badly things will go for them without a proper payment when it comes due. My nephew asked for power, and he received it. I understand he is capable of notable, if pedestrian, forms of magic from time to time. His wife asked for beauty, health and youth, and while this is foolish and vain, she is not an idiot. She made herself very hard to kill by most means. I asked for knowledge, the thing I'd always wanted most in life. The funny part is once I had it, instead of wanting more, I wanted much less. I understood and saw myself differently, saw how small and pathetic I was, we all were. And I understood how pointless and terrible it would be for you to have a lifetime of suffering. So I took you in. At first I tried to make amends out of guilt and self-loathing, but in time it was done more out of love for you. I'm sure you deserved a much better mother, but no one else could have kept them from you. While they don't fully understand how dangerous not inuring you through pain over the years will be for them, they have some dim knowledge that it was the plan and should be seen through. If not for their ignorance and arrogance, their fear of what's coming might have overridden their fear of me. I don't tell you these things now capriciously. They are part of my last best gifts to you, and my hope is collectively they will be enough to set you free of the thing we bound you into all those years ago. Read every bit of this carefully and thoroughly, but above all, please pay attention to my advice that follows. I got hired at Terminus, a truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Something is wrong here. I could barely breathe as I drove down the street. Tears slid down my cheeks, and I was gritting my teeth so hard it felt like my molars were going to crack. Eventually, I pulled over. I wasn't going to be able to drive right like this. I had to keep moving my black hair out of my face. Eventually, I kept my fingers laced in my hair, pressed the back of my head to my car seat, and screamed. I screamed so hard that my throat burned, that I felt it deep within my chest, that I could feel my emotions exiting my body. My heart felt like a train, threatening to burst from my chest. My brain felt like it was burning. I took a few deep breaths and let my hair go. 3 weeks ago, my sister came to me. She told me that she was having terrible nightmares. She showed me her arms, deep bruises covered her wrists, and her fingernails were bruised. Bruises went right up her arms. She removed the makeup from her face to reveal a deep black eye and a gash across her nose that she had been concealing with a band-aid. She showed me everything. My sister just turned 16, and my first thought was that someone had been hurting her. I questioned her, assured her that I would take her to the hospital, and that everything would be okay. But she was adamant that it was just bad dreams. I went to my father with concerns. He told me that Miley was probably getting into fights at school and was trying to cover her tracks or something. I knew that he would go and yell at her if I continued pressing, so I let it go. My father had become increasingly stressed ever since our mom was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. Millie and I went from being his best girls to the most hated people in his vicinity. It fell on me to help my sister, and she tried to hide her stress and fear well. I had to watch my mom when my dad was working and my sister was at school. I tried to keep everything together for all of us, but as time went on, I just wanted to make sure Miley and I ended up okay, and I know that sounds selfish. Last week, my mom left the house around midnight. My dad wasn't home yet, and Miley was asleep. I could catch her and be back before anyone knew that we were gone. It would be fine, everything was going to be okay. But it wasn't that easy. My mom took me on a chase. She ran as if she had somewhere to be. I was gone for about 30 minutes. My mom mumbled about the moon the whole time, how she felt like it was moving her blood. When I got her home, I went to check on Miley right away. If she woke up from a nightmare, she would want company before she fell back asleep. I moved up the stairs as fast as possible. I was only gone for about 30 minutes, so she should have been okay. My mind was screaming at me to check on her. When I entered her bedroom, my foot was lifted from under me, and I had slipped on something. I quickly slid my right hand along the wall and turned on the light. As soon as my eyes adjusted, I could feel my body grow tense. My whole body felt stiff, like I couldn't move or scream, even if I wanted to. Blood coated her black blanket and matching sheets, her white pillow, and the floor next to the bed. Splatter carried up the wall and nearly reached the ceiling. It was everywhere. The window was wide open, and as soon as I noticed, I ran right over to it. There was no one outside. To make a long story short, I called the cops, and after they investigated, we were told that no one can lose that much blood and survive. My father was their primary suspect. He blamed me, threw me out. My mom went to a home, and now here I am. I eventually composed myself enough to turn on the radio, hoping that some music would help me calm down, but I couldn't get a connection to any radio station. Each channel I flipped through landed on dead air. Eventually, I left one of the channels on and continued driving. I was hoping to find a motel or something. A bar especially sounded nice. Eventually, my radio buzzed to life, and a man's voice spoke. "Are you a lost traveler? Looking for a place to belong? Seeking refuge from your stressful life?" A jingle played behind the sentence. The smooth-talking man made my ear twitch. Something about his voice was calm and extremely inviting. Enticing, even. "The Terminus truck stop is what you're looking for. Just take a right and come on in. We are hiring," the man exclaimed before my radio turned off completely. I was admittedly pretty shocked, and it made me laugh. It was as if something came over me. I don't know what it was, perhaps curiosity or maybe the realization that I needed a job after being kicked out. It was the middle of nowhere, though. There was nothing but a long stretch of road behind me. A few cars drove past me, and I continued driving, picking up speed a little. After about 15 minutes, a turn came up, as if it had appeared from nowhere. I gripped the steering wheel as hard as possible, maybe too hard. As I came down the road, my eyes slowly widened. Sitting at the end was a truck stop, one of the biggest I had ever seen. The building itself was white with a red trim. There was one large area with the word food in bright red letters. I figured it glowed when the sun went down. The other half of the building was much bigger and had multiple words plastered on the side. Sleep plus TV plus games plus fuel. The Terminus building sign sat on a tall white board. It was lined in red lights, and the words were a bright, beaming blue. I watched as it twisted for a second before eyeing the row of red gas pumps with white trim and bits of blue sprinkling in. Some trucks were parked around the area, many of them for companies I couldn't recognize. As I got out of my car and walked inside, the smell of the most delicious chicken hit my nose. I suddenly felt starving, like I could eat a whole buffet. The checkered floors and retro soda machines brought a smile to my face for reasons that were hard to explain. The tables were white and red, and the counter and booths were blue and white. Various paintings hung on the walls, and I couldn't help but take a moment to look at them. I weaved through the lines of people to read some. The first painting that drew my eye was a large farmhouse surrounded by beautiful rows of corn. An older man, a woman, and a dog sat on the porch. 4 scarecrows, each wearing a different facial expression, were peppered throughout the corn. The plaque read, "Mercy Farms, 1699. The painting looked like it was done with a lot of love and care by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. I moved to the next painting. Large apartment buildings that stretched on forever littered the canvas. The detail was sublime. I could see people painted in the windows, cars that looked like models I had never seen parked in various parking spots. Some lights in a few windows, and something in the field of grass that I couldn't quite make out. The plaque read, Littlebrook, 1995. There were so many paintings left to see, I could feel curiosity overtake my brain. It felt like I was diving into something that was calling to me. Maybe that had been calling to me for a long time. I let my body wander over to one more painting. This one was slightly bigger than the rest. The top of the painting featured a large sun, and I could almost feel its heat permeating off the page. Further in the back I could make out a football field, and even further behind that there seemed to be a blue sun poking out of the treeline. The building in the painting looked like a high school, one that was in pretty good shape. I could see various figures in the windows, and a groundskeeper painted right in front of the building. Greenridge High School, 2015. I moved to the side to see one last picture. I couldn't help myself. There was a blinding light beaming down on a house and a gray man. At least I thought it was a man. But I was pulled out of my investigation when someone tapped my shoulder. Hello. A man with short red hair and beaming green eyes smiled at me. He wore black cargo pants, boots, and a black t-shirt. He had a red belt on and a pistol on his hip, and a beautiful white watch sat on his wrist. He looked like he worked out, like he could lift me up and simply carry me away. Hi. I coughed out. My name is Tom. Are you here about the open position? He asked me as he tucked his hands into his pockets. I wondered what brought him to me. There were at least 20 other people in here eating. Was I here to get a job? Part of me was screaming yes, but a softer part was telling me no. My brain was telling me I wasn't ready. I shook my head before putting a small smile on my face. Yeah. I heard the commercial on my radio while I was driving by. I figured I'd come and check it out. I told him honestly. Tom held his hand out and we shook hands. Come with me to the back room and let's get you situated, Tom said as he turned and motioned for me to follow. As our shoes clicked off the floor and the conversations from people eating and waiting in line filled my ears, I let a shock fall over my body. There was no interview, no questions asked. I just got the job on the spot. I walked behind him and smiled at the smells of fresh coffee, baked goods, chicken, and whatever else they were cooking. The people around me wore black outfits, much like Tom. Each one had a red belt on, but no weapons of any kind. The cooks wore white outfits with red belts. I didn't recognize a single brand on any of the packaging, and I was at ease with that. Once we reached the back room, Tom motioned for me to sit across from his desk. As I sat down and sank into the chair, I felt like my body was consumed by warmth. Paintings, pictures, both in color and black and white, and various other objects littered the room. We are hiring for the late shift, for our diner only. Here, Tom said as he slid a small packet across the desk. Please take a look at this. I leaned forward and took the red pamphlet. As I flipped it open, I read the first few pages. Welcome to the Terminus truck stop. During the day, we serve our regular customers. Please treat them with care and respect. When the sun goes down, our clientele changes. Please read the rules below and follow them to the letter. 1. You are not to go outside during your shift. Trash can be taken out at 7:30 a.m. 2. If a creature appears outside, do not go outside to confront it. Leave it be. 3. All of our employees wear a variation of the same outfit. If you see someone behind the counter who does not match this description, kill it with your service weapon. 4. A raven will sometimes appear at the drive-through window. It's harmless. Do not try to get rid of it. Let it be. 5. You are never to go to the other side of the building for any reason. You are never to leave with a trucker for any reason. 6. There is no reason to get to know your coworkers during your first month. Your service weapon is your friend. Use it at your discretion. I blinked a few times and reread the list. The rest of the pamphlet featured the brief history of the location. I was so consumed with reading that it took me a second to realize Tom had placed items in front of me. There was a red and a blue belt sitting on his desk. Each one had a holster. I don't know what came over me. I wasn't nervous, scared, or even slightly concerned. I stood up, reached over the table, and grabbed the blue belt. Tom raised his eyebrow at me. "What?" I asked as I watched him move and grab a uniform for me. I was being given a blue uniform and a blue set of boots. "No one ever picks blue," Tom says with a slight change to his voice. It was deeper. He was looking at me like I was suspicious. I wanted to ask why, but something was pushing me to keep my mouth shut. I was drawn to the blue from the moment I saw it outside. Choosing it happened before I could even think of it. "Do I need to sign anything?" I asked Tom as I held my uniform tightly. "No. But you do have to head into the employee restroom and get changed. Your shift starts when the sun goes down."
We had been friends for 13 years, and in those years I had not once slept at his house. "So why the sudden invite?" I asked. I settled the duffel on my shoulder, and he held the door. "My parents are going out," he said, and the words came out of him in a rush. "Figured it's about time you saw my humble abode." The house was not a humble abode. It was a great white clapboard house that stood on the land as if it had been there forever and the town had grown around it. Old oaks stood guard over the grounds, and their shadows fell across the yard. Inside the house, there was a smell of old wood and polish, and something more besides, a smell like turned earth after a rain. His mother was a woman built of small bones, and she carried a frantic smile that did not touch her eyes. She moved about the dim rooms with a nervous energy, asking of drinks and of snacks. His father sat in a leather chair, and he did not speak. He was a large man whose eyes were dark and still, and they followed us as we passed. I heard his mother whisper words to him, urgent and low, but I could not make them out. At 7 o'clock, his parents left. "So, what's the plan?" I asked. I dropped my bag on the floor of his room. The room was a small island of the ordinary in that house, with its posters and its rumpled bed and the console set before the television. It was the only place that did not feel as if it belonged to the dead. "Pizza, video games, the usual," Leo said. He knelt and woke the machine. He moved with a forced calm, but I saw the cordon in his neck. We ate the pizza and played the games, and for a time I did not think of the house or of the silence that lay coiled in its other rooms. For a time, it was only the two of us and the sounds from the screen. Then, near to 9, he paused the game. "Hey man," he said. He would not look at me, but worked the controller in his hands. "There's just one weird rule my parents have." "Weird rule?" "Yeah." He raised his head, and his eyes were serious as a stone. "After 9 p.m., we have to be in here, in the bedroom, and we can't leave, not for anything, not for the bathroom, not for a drink, nothing. The door stays closed until sunrise." I stared at his face and looked for the jest that was not there. "You're kidding, right? What if I have to pee?" "Pee now," he said. His voice was flat. He gestured with his chin to an empty bottle on his desk. "And after 9, you use that." The laugh I had in my throat died there. "Dude, that's insane. Why?" He shrugged his shoulders, but the motion was counterfeit. "They're just super weird about security. Old house, you know. They think it's drafty." Drafty. I knew he was lying, I just didn't know why. Downstairs, a clock began to chime the hour, and his head snapped toward the door. Bong, bong, bong. He was on his feet before the 9th bell had sounded its note. He crossed the room and closed the door. He slid a heavy bolt of steel into its housing, and the sound it made was final. "There," he said. A sweat had bloomed on his brow, and he breathed out the word. "We're good." "Leo, what the hell is going on?" I demanded. "Nothing, man. Just a weird rule," he said. He would not look at the door. He turned up the sound of the game until it was a roar in that small room. But I did not see the game. I saw only the bolted door, and I felt a coldness take root in my gut. The house was quiet again, but it was not the same quiet. This was a listening quiet, a waiting quiet. And in the dark heart of that house, something waited, and we were locked in that room and waiting with it. An hour passed, and there was no sound from the house. The fear went out of Leo slowly, and he played the game with a feigned calm that did not sit right on him. We played on in that silence, and a vexation grew in me at the foolishness of it all. "You really need to tell your parents this is a certifiable way to raise a serial killer," I said. He gave back a fake smile. "Tell me about it." Then came a sound from the rooms below. It was a soft and measured thumping on the boards of the main hall. "What's that?" I whispered. Leo played on. He stared at the screen, and his fingers worked the buttons as if he did not hear. "It's nothing. House settling." "That's not the house settling, Leo." The sound ceased. In the quiet, I could hear the blood in my own ears. Then there came a new sound, which was a dragging sound, a scraping of some great weight across the wood floor beneath us, as of a heavy thing with broken feet. I muted the television. "Okay, that's definitely not the house," I said. Leo set the controller down upon the carpet. His face was pale in the shifting light of the screen. "Just ignore it, Liam, please. It goes away if you ignore it." "What? What is it? What goes away?" Before he could answer, it spoke. The voice came from the hallway, faint at first, on the other side of our door.
Before he could answer, it spoke. The voice came from the hallway, faint at first, on the other side of our door. "Leo, honey." I did not move. The voice was his mother's voice. "Leo, sweetheart, your father and I came home early. I brought you boys some warm cookies. Open the door." I looked to Leo and saw a boy cast in tallow. He stared at the door as if it were the gate of hell itself, and he raised a trembling finger to his lips and shook his head. "Leo, that's your mom," I whispered. "Don't be silly, sweetie, we're inside," the voice said. "It was just outside the door now. I just baked your favorites. Chocolate chip. They're getting cold." The scraping from below had stopped. There was only the sweet persuasion of that voice in the silent house. But the voice was wrong. There was a terrible perfection in its sound, like a memory of a voice and not the voice itself. Then came the knocking. It was a soft and wet sound on the far side of the door, as if a piece of meat were striking the wood. "Leo, Liam, are you boys all right in there? You're being awfully quiet." "Leo," I mouthed, but no sound came. He sat upon the floor like a man made of stone, his eyes wide with a plea that had no words. He looked like something trapped. The knob of the door turned, once to the left and once to the right. Then it began to rattle in its fitting with a growing violence. "Boys, this isn't funny," the voice said. The sweetness broke in it then, and it was replaced with a hard and ragged edge. "Open the door." A great blow struck the door, and the frame of it groaned in the wall. I scrambled away from it, on my hands and feet, until my back was against the far wall of the room. The voice changed. It spoke again, and the voice was a ruin, a low and guttural thing that gurgled in its throat. "IKNOWYOUREINTHERE." The wet tapping began again, faster now and frantic. With it came a thin and keening whine, a sound like wind through a crack in the world. And from the dark gap beneath the door, a black and viscous fluid began to seep into the room. It was thick as oil, and it carried the smell of the grave, of wet soil, and of things that rot in the earth. Leo moved. He crawled to the bed and pulled the blankets over him, and became a small and shuddering shape in the dim room. He had gone into his own darkness. On the other side of the door, the thing fell silent. I knew it was not gone. I knew that in my bones. It was there in the darkness beyond the door, and it was waiting. I kept my back to the far wall and I watched the door. My breath was a small and panicked thing in my throat. On the bed Leo was a trembling knot of blankets and fear. For me, this was a night's journey into that darkness. For him, it was the place he lived. A fool's curiosity which has been my ruin more than once warred with the terror. A need to see the shape of the thing that hunted us. A dreadful truth was better than not knowing. I went forward on my stocking feet, and the old boards did not whisper. "Liam, no," came a voice from the bed, muffled by the cloth. Don't look." But I would look. I knelt upon the floor, and the reek of the grave was stronger. I lowered my head to the cold brass of the keyhole. At first there was only the dim hall and the moonlight that fell in a pale blade from the window at its end. Then it stepped into the narrow view. It was not a man, nor was it a beast. It was a thing that was built of sticks and of shadow, impossibly tall and thin. Its limbs were the limbs of a winter tree, and its body was a gyre of dust and night that had no true form. It wore his mother's floral apron, the cloth stretched over a hollow space where a chest should be. It wore his father's hunting cap set upon a head that was only a clot of moving dark. It had no face, only a void. In one of its twig-like hands it held a picture I had seen on the wall, a portrait of the family. It held this picture before the void where its face should be, and it wore the smile of Leo's mother for its own. From its body it put forth a long and blackened twig of an arm, and it tapped upon the door. Thump, thump, thump. I threw myself back from the door and clapped a hand to my mouth to keep the gorge from rising. My mind could not hold the shape of what I had seen. This was no creature that had entered the house. This was the house itself, a parasite that wore the stolen keepsakes of the dead or the soon-to-be dead for its raiment. From the door a new voice whispered, and the blood in me went to ice. "Liam? Why are you hiding in there? Your mother is so worried about you." It was my own mother's voice. Perfect. The voice she used when I was a child and sick with fever, the call to supper from a life I would not see again. A wave of homesickness and of horror washed over me, for I wanted to be home and I was not. And the thing in the hall gave a low chuckle that was the sound of dry leaves scuttling on a stone walk. It knew it had found the part of me that was soft. "Let me in, Liam," my mother's voice whispered, a sound of love and of poison. "I've come to take you home." I fell back to the wall and slid to the floor, and I felt the heat of shame in my thighs where my body had betrayed me. I looked at the trembling shape on the bed. The bottle he had offered. It had not been a joke. It had not been a rule but a kindness. A tool for survival, for he knew. He knew all of it. The scraping began upon the door itself. A slow and patient sound, as of a claw being sharpened upon the wood. All the while it whispered my name in the voice of my mother, and it promised me an end to all this if I would but unlatch the door. The hours passed in that room, and the thing outside did not cease its siege. It spoke in the voices of the living and of those I could not know, a gallery of ghosts at the door. It offered warmth and food. It promised an end to the long night. And all the while it scraped at the wood with a patience that was a madness to hear. The fear had burned away in me, and left a hard and bitter anger. I was angry at the thing in the hall, and at the people who had built for it a cage and called it a home, and I was angry at the boy who hid in his blankets and would not speak. Hours passed. "Leo," I said. My voice was a dry croak in my throat. "Leo, wake up." A shape stirred in the bed. He looked out from the pale fortress of his sheets, and his eyes were raw with fear. "Is it gone?" he whispered. "No, it's not gone," I said. "I need to know what this is. Now. No more lies. What is that thing?" "You've seen my books." "No, I'm not going to tell you which books, nor who I am, so don't ask. I assure you though, if you're a big reader, or even a sort of reader, then you've probably read, or at least heard of, some of my stuff. My stuff in the hypothetical sense of the phrase. As the title says, I was never actually the one who wrote my books. Again, don't ask me who really did or not because of privacy, or theft laws, or anything. I just don't know. I used to be a plumber, of all things. Not the most glamorous of professions, but it paid pretty well, seeing how almost nobody wanted to do it. My dad trained me right out of high school, and pretty soon I'd saved enough to move to my own apartment. A few years later, I decided I may as well sell my soul and get locked into a mortgage, because at least then the rent money wouldn't be going to waste. The idea was to get a few roommates and have them pay for my house instead, but I'm a private person. It's not that I liked living alone, per se, but I never had many friends growing up. I didn't know who to invite to the other rooms, and the idea of strangers moving in with me. I read. That's what you do when you're 26 and you don't have friends. You read books and pretend you do have friends, and when you finish one book and realize you're still alone, you pick up the next one. It's a bit like alcohol. You have to drink another glass in the morning to recover from the damage of the glass from the night before, except nobody ever applauds you for getting drunk as a hobby the way they do for reading. If that all sounds like a terribly depressed way to view life, well, it's probably because I was. However you want to say it. I was in what you might call a drought period, one of those times when you read something exceptional the month before, and now, you can't find anything that compares to it. I tried a few series, but nothing piqued my interest, and I'd all but given up, resorted to watching Friends for the 30th time instead. That's when I found The Basement. Basement is a strong word. Crawl space is more accurate. I was pulling up the carpeting in one of the guest rooms during some renovations, and there it was. This flat door with a brass handle, on the closet floor. Like any new home owner, I opened it and hopped down. Rot and mildew and something metallic, all bundled into one scent. Maybe a cat had died here? It was 4, possibly 4.5 feet tall. I had to stoop all the way over to shuffle forwards. I was barely 10 steps in when it appeared on the ground. A stack of papers. They weren't in any sort of an envelope. No rubber band holding them together, or even a staple. About 20 sheets were stacked one on top of another, perfectly white as if they'd just come from the printer, even though nobody had been down here for years judging from the age of the carpet. The passage ended a little after that, so I grabbed the papers, climbed out, and closed the trapdoor. It wasn't until that night, when I'd finished tearing out the carpet, and the emptiness of the house was getting to me, that I actually stopped to read the papers. The story on them. I was enthralled. I didn't move until I'd finished them, but each word, each sentence, gripped me and dragged me in. It was real. That's what it felt like. The story on the paper was reality, and my life was the fake thing made of ink. If only I could keep reading, I could keep living, and I turned the last page. The story stopped mid-sentence. I flipped through the pages over and over, hoping somehow I'd missed a page, that there was more. I reread the entire thing. Then again. Then again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called in sick. I paced the house. I tried watching TV. I tried reading, but nothing worked. I was obsessed. I had to finish the story, but the ending didn't even exist. After 2 days of this, I'd had enough. I'll bury it, I thought. I'll bury it, and my mind will accept it's over. Instead of digging a hole, though, I went back to the crawl space. I would leave it where I found it, and try to forget the story. When I went back down, a fresh stack of pages awaited me. That's how it started. New pages wouldn't appear until the old ones were read, but that was no problem. I read them with a savage hunger, chapter after chapter. I called in sick to work again, But when my dad tried to come visit, I told him not to. That he'd only get sick. I read for hours and hours, taking trips back down to the crawl space where new pages would await me each time, until finally it was finished. The end. I popped down one more time, just to see if there was some sort of an epilogue, but the crawl space was empty. The story was over. For weeks I searched online for clues about who had written the story. Nothing came up. I reached out to the past owner of the house. "There's a crawl space?" they asked me. We never knew. I sat on the book for weeks and weeks, obsessed but resolved to give it up, to put it past me. Eventually, I reached out to some literary agents. One more sip of alcohol to cure the hangover. From what I hear, it takes months and months of waiting to hear back after you reach out to agents. The ones I reached out to took days. Each of them requested to read the whole book, and each of them offered me contracts within the week. "You're the best writer I've ever signed," said the agent I went with. I didn't correct her. Publishing went much the same. It should have taken months. Within weeks, I had signed with a major publishing house. The editing process that should have taken months took days. "I can't imagine changing a word of this," my editor told me. "You're an amazing writer." I said nothing. Most authors face mediocre success at best. The ones you hear about, those are the exceptions. For every career author, there's 100 authors that never make back their advance. That should have been my expectation, but even then I knew something was different about this book. Not just the way I'd found it, but the things it did to me. To others. It was enthralling in the way a blind kitten crawling towards a cliff is enthralling. Once you glance at it, you can't look away. Sure enough, it was a bestseller. It won awards. I earned back my advance in weeks. They invited me to talk shows and conventions, but I declined them all. "Don't get used to this," I told myself. It was one book. It wasn't even yours. The inflow of money was great, fantastic really, but I didn't quit my regular job. It wasn't like I'd be writing another book, and eventually, everybody would calm down. They'd forget about my book, and I'd be forgotten. The friends would stop calling. Things would go back to normal. And then, one night, when I couldn't sleep, after I'd spent hours staring up at the ceiling of my lonely bedroom, I went back down. Some deep, slumbering part of me had already known they'd be there. The new pages. That was how it had worked the first time, after all. I had to read the pages for new ones to appear. It made sense. I would have to publish the last book for a new one to appear. I read the new chapters. I visited the crawl space 10 more times that night until I'd finished the whole thing. The next day, I quit my job. And so began my new life. I timed it purposefully. Every 6 to 8 months I would submit my new manuscript. Every 6 months I would take a trip back down to the cellar. Each book release shot me back up to the top of the bestseller list. Money rolled in steadily, more than I knew what to do with. It wasn't like I was going to buy a new house. No, that much was obvious. I would live where I did until I died, because I needed to. For my career, I told myself. I have to stay here for my career. Even then, though, I think I knew. I wasn't staying there to support my lifestyle. It was a nice perk. Being rich certainly had its benefits, but it was about the books. It was always about the books. I reread them constantly. What else was there to do? The hours most writers take to write was free time for me. Might as well read. Reread. Consume. At first, I would see how long I could go without picking one of my books. One day, 2, 3. That was the limit, I discovered. By day 3 my palms would get sweaty and my stomach would start cramping. Eventually, I stopped resisting. Reading was all I did with my time. I quit all other books. I did try to read them, but none of them satisfied me. They were flat. Like the 2D version of the 3D stories the crawlspace gave me. They were the lotus flowers from the Greek myths. Once you try one, regular food could never taste the same. At least it's just me, I told myself, my one small comfort. I could fade away, give in, and that was all right. Nobody else would be harmed. Besides my dad, nobody cared about me. I wasn't hurting anybody. I convinced myself that was the truth. I really believed the books were just affecting me, until my first book signing. I'm not entirely sure what convinced me to do it. Maybe it was my agent or publisher who'd both pestered me to do one for years. Partially, it was due to one of the rare recovery periods where I was actively trying to stop reading, always to little success. But I did one, my very first book signing. The bookstore filled up. Literally, they were turning people away. Hundreds showed up to meet me, the false author of these best-selling books. They were so excited to meet me. I saw the anticipation as I did a reading. I was almost looking forward to the book signing, despite the hours-long line. "Yours are my favorite books," one woman told me. "These are what got me into reading," said another. "They're the only thing I read now." "Glad to hear it," I said, chuckling, as I signed. I looked up. The man wasn't smiling. "I'm not," he said. He walked away. I started noticing it then. The jittery look in the eyes. The way people desperately clutched their copies of my books, not in a loving way. Not like a child clinging to a teddy bear. More like victims of the Titanic hanging from the rails as it tipped. "What else do you read?" I asked a teenager and her father. The teenager shook her head. "Nothing." "Why would I?" To another fan holding a battered copy, I asked, "How many times have you read it?" She laughed nervously. I don't know. I can't remember." She burst into tears. "I can't stop." "Why can't I stop?" Almost nobody reacted as she tore out of the bookstore, sobbing. It was in all of them, that frantic obsession in me. Their simultaneous loathing and love for the books. Some of them outright scowled at me, like they hadn't wanted to come, but hadn't been able to resist. It was the very last woman in line who scared me the most. She didn't even look up at me. She stared down at the book in her hands, the very first one I'd ever published. She never responded to my questions. She never put it down. I recognized the cover. It was the first edition of my first book, which meant she'd been one of the earliest people ever to pick me up. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her teeth were falling out like she couldn't spare the time to brush them, and her skin was a sickly yellow. I never did another book signing. It gets worse as time goes on. That's what I've realized. The longer you read them, the more dependent you are on them. I've tried to stop publishing. Of course I have. 12 times. Look at what my books are doing to people. Look at what they'll continue to do. Even if I could stop though, it wouldn't matter. Once you've tasted the lotus petal, you can never go back. No one I've talked to has been able to quit once they've read something from the crawl space. All those people at the book signing, all my thousands and thousands of readers, it's too late for them, the way it's too late for me. My hair falls off in clumps now. My skin is yellow, and my teeth? Nearly all of them are gone. Even so, I continue. Year after year. Climbing down through that trapdoor. Sending off my manuscripts to the publisher. I can't stop. I don't want to anymore. It's easier to just give in. Sip by sip by sip. It's almost a relief to grab the pages the crawl space gives me and pump them out into the world. That's the only way I get more of them, and it's not like I can write my own stories. This entire time, I've never written a word myself, not one. Not even these ones. Kevin has been my stepfather since marrying my mother in 2024. Mum met him in 2022, 2 years after Dad passed away. Kevin was a godsend, truth be told. Stereotypically, stepfathers are loathsome, right? Comically villainous? Well, I was kind of hoping for that, so I'd have a reason to dislike him. Frustratingly, however, I found that I really didn't hate the guy. And I was a grouchy 15-year-old whose grief was only just starting to dim, so all of the ingredients were there. I should have hated my stepdad, but I didn't. Kevin was nice. Kevin was perfect. It took until spring of this year for that illusion to slip, for me to learn of my stepfather's special interest, bottlenose dolphins. I was relieved, initially, to learn of his little quirk. I was surprised that it had taken 3 years for Kevin's oddness to come to light, but I was simply glad to finally have evidence of an abnormality. Having some sort of flaw made him seem, in my eyes, more human. I was wrong. Shortly before starting university last September, Kevin took me fishing, despite my gentle reminder that I don't really like the activity that much. Ironically, my older sister, Becky, was keener to give it a whirl, but Kevin called it an opportunity for male bonding. That whole thing rubbed her the wrong way. I, on the other hand, was more than happy to add misogyny to the list of my stepfather's imperfections. Why was I so gleeful about finding something wrong with Kevin? Did I always know, deep down, that he wasn't quite right? And, if so, did I just want a tame explanation for that churning feeling in my gut? Something that didn't scare me? Peaceful out here, isn't it, Craig? Kevin said as we both dangled our rods into the water. I shrugged. Sure. Don't worry, he chuckled. You'll be at university soon. Clubbing. Drinking. Making mistakes. You'll be away from your boring dad. Is it okay if I call myself that? I stifled a frustrated sigh. You always ask me that, and the answer is always, yes. I know, but you still refuse to use the word, said Kevin, and that makes me sad. I awkwardly tried to change the topic. So, why do you love fishing so much? My stepfather's face lit up. Nature, Craig. It's a beautiful thing. Terrible, sometimes, but beautiful. Perfectly balanced. Perfectly designed. Do you want to know my favorite animal in the world? It was an odd question, something a child might ask. His giddy tone was quite childlike too. Still, I nodded. The bottlenose dolphin, Kevin whispered, looking longingly at the water. That's why I convinced your mother to go on our lovely little Welsh getaway before you go to university. I want to see them swimming off the coast. God, I used to go every year, and it's been 3 now. I'm desperate. But this is nice. Really nice. Talking to you about the bottlenose, I've spent the last 3 years chewing your mother's ear off about him, so it's refreshing to finally have a chance to tell somebody new. The bottlenose is my favorite animal. Maybe my favorite thing in the whole world. I struggled to contain a smirk at Kevin's impassioned rant. Given that this dolphin's so important to you, I'm surprised I've not heard you talk about it before. My stepfather sighed, a deep, sorrowful sigh. Well, not everybody understands, Craig. I've been vulnerable in the past. Opened up about my passion. Shared this side of myself. And many times, I've been burnt. I snorted with laughter, but tried to play it off as a cough. However, Kevin fell silent after that. And it wasn't a pleasant silence. There was contemplation, but it bubbled with rage. I could see my stepfather seething beneath his face's crumbling veneer of pleasantry. Anyhow, 1 week later, the 4 of us arrived at our Airbnb in Cardigan Bay, North Wales. Whilst Mum and Kevin booked a boating excursion along the coast, I spilt the beans to Becky. Prepare yourself, I said. On our fishing trip, I learnt that Kevin's really into dolphins. So am I, she replied. No, he's really into them, I insisted with a grin. My sister lifted an eyebrow. What do you mean? I smirked and nodded my head at our stepfather, who was giddily bouncing from foot to foot whilst he and Mum huddled together in front of the iPad. Becky smiled. Well, that's kind of cute, isn't it? I shook my head, trying to swallow the slight lump rising up my throat. Something about that day still didn't sit well with me. I guess so. At first, I thought so. But he got weird about it. See, I made the mistake of laughing, and then I don't know. That's what he gets for choosing you over me, Becky giggled. Male bonding isn't all it's cracked up to be, eh? I would have been sweet and understanding. I wouldn't have laughed at his dolphin boner. I brayed with laughter. Please, never say those words together again. Why are you two chuckling? Asked Mum as she and Kevin walked over to us in the kitchen. Becky silently mouthed dolphin boner to me, and I tried desperately to suppress my grin. Nothing, I eventually managed to answer. We're just excited for this boat trip. Our mother raised an eyebrow. My 2 teenage children are excited to spend the day with us? Well, that's not suspicious at all. Teenage. Becky's nearly 20, I pointed out. She's old now. You're both fetuses to us, Mum sighed, scooping up her coat from the counter. Now, shall we go for a little mooch around town before the sun scuttles away? We've got an hour before our booking. Kevin was distant whilst we wandered around the shops. His gaze belonged to the sea, which Becky had clocked too. We shared a few knowing grins, realizing that he was daydreaming about those bottlenose dolphins. And he ended up dragging us down to the dock about 10 minutes before our booking. We're going to have the boat all to ourselves, whispered Kevin dreamily. Well, not quite, came a voice from behind us. We turned to see a stout man with a gray, bushy beard waddling down the wooden pier towards us. Dave! Kevin roared jubilantly, before embracing him. That's Captain Dave to you, the man corrected, and the two laughed. Becky frowned. You know him. They're old friends, Mum said. That's how we got the boat all to ourselves. Got yourselves a good discount too, Dave chuckled. Some would think being friends for 30 years entitles a man to more than 30% off, Kevin quipped. Dave rolled his eyes. Stop trying to bleed my dry, why bastard? Come on, folks. Hop on board. It was a beautiful day. That's one of the main things I remember. The sun beat down mercilessly, slow roasting us. I sat by the taffrail, letting the sea breeze cool me down a little. And that was when I saw it. A gray, shimmering fin, rising and falling rhythmically above and below the surface of the water. I opened my mouth to say something, but, "OH, it's beautiful!" yelled Kevin at the top of his lungs. Kathy, do you see this? I see it. My mum chuckled from beside him. The two of them were cuddling beside me, watching as the creature danced alongside our boat, and I turned to look for my sister. She wasn't on the deck. You need to get and fetch Becky, Kevin insisted. I nodded, but when I reached the entryway to the cabin, I found only Captain Dave standing behind the wheel. He nodded at me with the slightest smile. And I felt unnerved. I felt displaced. I felt just as I had on that fishing trip. Where is she? I asked. Said she wanted a nap. Dave replied, nodding again, this time towards the door at his right, which led to quarters below deck. Don't think she had much interest in the dolphins. I furrowed my brow and barged past the captain, before throwing the door open. Down 4 steps, there was a cramped room, which contained a small table, littered with takeaway boxes, and a single bed at the back. Becky lay on it, chest rising and falling with the gentleness of the dolphin's fin. I managed to calm my breathing a little. Bottlenose dolphins are special animals, Craig. The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see Kevin closing the door. It's a little weird for my sister to be sleeping in the captain's bed, isn't it? I asked. Kevin ignored me. You're missing the dolphins, boy. Boy. He'd never called me that before. And there was a curtness to the tone, a bite. Kevin, I don't care how well you know Dave. I don't want my sister to sleep down here, I said, before turning towards the bed and kneeling down. Wake up, Becky. She's going to be resting for a while, Kevin whispered. Then came the click of the door locking, and I felt a pang of fear in my chest like nothing I've ever felt before. It was a blade that drove through my ribs, twisting tightly into my heart. I struggled to breathe, struggled to move. But I managed to twist my jittery, half-paralyzed body towards Kevin. I sat on the floor, back against the bed, forming a weak and flimsy barrier between the approaching man and my sister. Mum, I weakly croaked, voice failing me. Mum's sleeping too, he whispered. But you're awake. You want to hear me talk about my favorite animal, don't you? I tried to shake my head, but I was frozen in fear. I'd been telling myself for months that turning 18 meant I'd finally become an adult. However, in that moment I was a boy. Frightened and alone. As I told you out on the lake, nature is a beautiful thing, Kevin continued, taking slow steps towards me. It demands balance. We're part of that, you and me. Human beings. You know, there's so much to be learnt from the animals around us. Bottlenose dolphins are our greatest teachers. Now, it isn't just about their intelligence, their social hierarchy, their proclivity for aggression. No, they're related to us in another way. You see, they understand that cruelty serves a purpose, that nature bends to no rules, no ethical standards. Do you know what they do when eyeing a taken woman, Craig? A taken woman. Those words iced my body even more firmly to the spot, foreshadowed the horrifying revelation that I had already started to, in part, predict. I curled up tightly against the bed as Kevin took another step closer. I'll tell you then, Kevin sighed. Bottlenose dolphins commit infanticide as part of sexual selection. In other words, a male will kill a female's existing offspring in order to induce estrus, return her to heat, to a state of fertility. Then, he will mate with her and create fresh offspring. He will ascend to become the prime male, extinguishing the previous male's bloodline. Now, humans aren't dolphins. I'm no fool, Craig. But there is, I think, something to be learnt from the magnificent bottlenose. You see, much like them, our intelligence very nearly gets in the way of our baser instincts. But in the right circumstances, nature overrides our silly, emotional minds. And I've found time and time again that taking away a human mother's cubs reawakens something in her. That broodiness. That desperation to procreate. To protect the family line. To ensure the species' survival. It gives the male a chance to sire her next offspring. Of course, there will be immense grief, but out of that grief is born a new desire. A new purpose. And I will be there to take the reins. To start a new family with your mother. I've been patient these past 5 years, but the time is right. I managed to splutter a few more words. Please, I don't understand. Kevin's face surveyed me neutrally, with thin lips and eyes dark and unfeeling. That was what your father said. My heart halted. The clamp had tightened, finally bringing it to a stop. What did you say? I hoarsely whispered. Kevin knelt down before me. There was only a yard or so between us. I saw you, your sister, and your mother, he softly explained. Saw the 3 of you visiting him in the hospital. Saw how happy the 4 of you were. A lovely little family. And I thought, why shouldn't I have that? So, I made it happen, Craig. He probably would have woken from the coma, you know, given enough time. But I wasn't going to let that happen. My heart restarted, only to pound more furiously than ever as I stared into those terrifying eyes, realized that this was no nightmare, that Kevin was not lying. My father hadn't died due to malfunctioning equipment, as the hospital had claimed. This monster had intervened, had planned to take my dad's family, had succeeded. I started to feel the life return to my limbs, to my hands. I started to move my right hand along the floor and wrapped it around the clunky, steel-toed boot lying on the floor. For what it's worth, I always liked you, Craig, Kevin promised. But we have to take notes from nature. I'll never be anything more than Catherine's provider until I clean the slate completely. Your father isn't gone yet. Not until you and Becky are gone. As Kevin's beady eyes glinted in the orange glow of the swinging bulb above, I sensed that he was moments from pouncing. So, I swung the toe end of the boot straight at Kevin's temple. He cried out and fell to the floor, massaging his wounded head. The boot hadn't been enough to put him down for good, but it had given me time to get to my feet. I wasn't a typical child. Despite the 1,000 questions I had growing up, I was too obedient to insist on them. While other kids had their why phases, I, though naturally curious, was content to hear, because I said so. So I didn't question the rules and followed them as law. I couldn't open the window because they said so, and so I didn't. But the questions I didn't ask fought with the theories and stories I made up in my mind. When my younger brother, Luis, entered his why phase, I found myself having to explain something I didn't even know. So I replied with the most plausible theories: to keep mosquitoes out, to stop someone from trying to break in, so no madman would be staring at us through binoculars. But Luis, since our parents weren't as strict with him as they were with me, didn't settle for mere theoretical explanations. He wanted to learn firsthand. What if the house catches fire and we need to jump out the window? He once asked our father. Can't we open it then? My father put his spoon down in his bowl of soup and let out a long sigh. You must never open it. Don't worry about the house catching fire. It won't. Luis kept insisting, but my father ordered him to finish his soup and go to bed. Luis's questions deepened mine, but I didn't dare ask. If my brother got a harsh word for undesirable behavior, I'd get a slap, or worse. One day, I went to a sleepover at a friend's house. I was 14 then, Luis was 10. When I returned the next morning, Luis was acting strange. He didn't initiate conversation, and answered any questions with 1 or 2 words. I remember it was a Sunday, and he spent a long time lying on the laundry room floor. After a lot of insistence on my part, he finally said he was tired but didn't want to go back to our room alone. But that night, our mother forced him to sleep there. I told him he didn't need to worry, because I'd be in the bed beside him. That's when he really spoke for the first time that day. Can I tell you a secret? He whispered. I nodded. I opened the window yesterday, he confessed, looking down at his thighs, slouched in a way that was unusual for him. My curiosity overcame the fear and obedience I had toward our parents. I leaned in toward my brother, barely able to hide my excitement at uncovering the mystery. What happened? I asked, probably too loud and too fast. He took a while to answer. Nothing really happened. I mean, it did and it didn't. Because I didn't see anything, but I felt my heart pounding hard and I got so cold I thought I was going to die. That sounds like anxiety, I said. But it's not just that, he insisted. I think there's something in here. I think I let it in. Let who in? I don't know. But it's here. It's in here with us. You don't believe in ghosts, do you? I asked, unable to hide my skeptical disappointment. I don't know. But they whisper when we're almost asleep. I don't know what they want. But they're speaking into my ear. I told Luis to relax, that he was just feeling guilty for disobeying our parents and was making up nightmares in his head. He didn't believe me, but he laid down, though his eyes stayed wide open. I went to sleep. But just as I was about to drift off, I heard a whisper, unintelligible. I turned, imagining I'd find Luis standing beside the bed. But I saw his shape on the other side of the room, lying down, motionless. I told myself I was just scared because of Luis's fear. I turned to the side and tried to sleep again. I woke up gasping, choking, desperate for air that was too rough to calm my lungs. I heard the voices again, tangled, incomprehensible. The hairs on my body stood on end. What if Luis was right? What if something did come in through the window? What if that's what our parents were trying to keep out? From that moment on, our childhood became increasingly strange, filled with events that always bordered on the supernatural but still left me unsure. We were constantly hearing things we were in the room, only being able to understand 1 or 2 words of the whispering, never enough for anything to make sense. We'd see silhouettes, feel suddenly could in the summer, hear scratching or footsteps. All that could be attributed to our anxious imaginations. We never told our parents about opening the window. That'd only get us into further trouble. I kept telling Luis that there was nothing really hurting us, so we should suck it up and live with it. But sometimes even our parents would comment on how scared we looked, how stressed we were. Still, they'd sound more annoyed than concerned. Sometimes, when we were too scared to stay in that room, we'd sleep on the living room floor. I'd had to get up before my parents, though, as I was scared they'd be suspicious if they saw us sleeping there. We'd jump on any opportunity to not sleep on that room, and we'd often spend our vacations with our grandparents, mostly to avoid whatever was sleeping with us, but also because our grandparents' home didn't have many rules to follow, and we could act our age without getting in trouble. When Luis was 13 and I was 17, he went to his first sleepover alone and I had to sleep in that room by myself for the first time. I thought I was old enough not to give in to anxiety. I thought I had to put on brave face, so I did the opposite of what any reasonable person would do. I decided to watch a horror movie by myself in that room. At first, it was kinda working. I could blame the anxiety on the movie. I could convince myself that our room was just a regular room. No hauntings, none of that existed. It was kinda freeing in a way. Then the window slammed itself open, despite the lock being in place as always. The noise made me recoil, covering my head with my arms. But when I realized what happened, I jumped to the window to close it again. As I was trying to get my breathing steady, my mom opened the door and asked me what the hell I was doing. "I'm sorry," I said, even more nervous. I dropped my physics book. That was enough to convince her to leave. I couldn't sleep that night at all. I spent hours pacing around the room, fear and anger growing inside me. It was almost 2 a.m. when I laid down with my phone, watching several guided meditations on YouTube, none of which was working. When my eyes began to close, I heard the whispering, but this time it was clearer. "Her fault. Trapped here. Let me out. Kill her." I jumped out of bed, shivering, sweating cold, and started pacing around again. I was convinced I was going to lose my mind that night. But when morning came, I left the room and forced myself to act normal as I could. I never told anyone what I thought I heard, not even Luis. Anxiety and fear followed us until we moved out. I still have questions I can't bring myself to ask. And now, Luis doesn't ask questions anymore either. In fact, we never talk about it. But sometimes I feel like I'm going to lose my mind if I don't find out what was in that room, and what came in through that window. And most importantly, why it was there in the first place.
This happened about 10 years ago in the south of France. I was going to work in my 1988 Peugeot 205. Great car. Speed limit was 70 kilometers per hour. I was comfortably doing 90. I approached a mini roundabout. View was clear. I slow down, and then a gendarme comes out from behind a tree holding a speed gun and orders me to stop. I slam on the brakes. There's no ABS on that car. Not sure it had been invented in 1988. And for a second, I think I'll be okay. But then the wheels lock, and I come to a halt just before the white line. I see 2 puffs of grey smoke drift lazily towards the gendarme, and I can tell he is not impressed. He comes to my window, shaking his head slightly, and tells me, "And that's why this road is a 70, not a 90. License and registration, please." Now this gendarme and his buddy are motorcycle gendarmes, the elite of French law enforcement. They are military, not police, and are arguably some of the best riders in the world. They are very professional, but will not take any shit from anybody. They tell me I have a €90 fine, and the whole thing goes flawlessly until they get a look at my driver's license, which isn't French. They tell me that since I have a foreign license, they either collect the €90 fine on the spot, or they impound my car. I tell them I don't have the cash. They say no problem, we'll escort you to an ATM. We drive there, I give them the money, they give me a bunch of paperwork, and we have a little chat about safety, speeding, etc. As we depart, I ask them if it's okay to shake their hand. They are really surprised by the request and ask me why I want to shake their hand. I tell them they were super professional and respectful, and it was super nice to have a chat with them and get their perspective. And it's a way of saying, no hard feelings for pulling me over. You're doing a great job. They really laughed at that, gladly shook my hand, and we all went our way. 5 minutes later, I find myself completely stuck in traffic. I thought it was weird because it was the first time I saw that much traffic in that place. I slowly move forward and eventually reach a roundabout where I can see a lot of flashing blue lights. Every road leading to the roundabout seemed to be blocked by the police, and it looked like they were looking for someone. Turns out, they were looking for me. I hear someone shout, "There he is, the white 205, and I see the two motorcycles from earlier drive against the traffic towards me, stop their motorcycles in the middle of the road, effectively blocking both lanes of traffic in front of me. What was hilarious at this point was the looks on people's faces in the cars around me. They were on the verge of panic, probably thinking I was a terrorist or something, and desperately looking for a way to get as far away from me as possible. The two gendarmes come off their bikes and tell me, "We're so happy you're here. We had to ask colleagues to filter the roundabouts in this neighborhood to try and find you." Turns out, they had given me both copies of the speeding ticket and desperately wanted one back. Otherwise, it would look like they extorted money by issuing fake tickets. I give them the paper they were after. They genuinely look super relieved. And then, with a huge grin, they hold out their arm to shake my hand. I laughed, shook their hand, and glanced around. Everybody now looked totally puzzled, wondering what the hell was going on with that bearded guy in a crap car. Now here's the best part. They apologized for all the fuss and asked me where I was headed. I told them I was just 5 minutes away, gave the name of the building, and they said, "No worries, we'll escort you there. We owe you that." They climb back on their bikes. People around me start up their cars, and the two gendarmes immediately hold their hands up, ordering everyone to hold still. And we drove off, one motorcycle in front of me and one behind. It was totally worth the speeding ticket. A little over a year ago, I got a text at 1:04 a.m. Is the green one better or the gold one? Was answer fast. No name, no context, just that. I was half asleep, but something about it made me laugh. I replied, "Green. Always go with the green one." 2 minutes later, "Okay, thank you." I'm freaking out. I think I love him. An IDK, if this is a date? It's like a maybe date. I didn't have the heart to say wrong number, so I just said, "Then wear the green. Look good, feel better, and maybe date the hell out of it." She texted back, "You're literally a stranger, but I love you. Thank you." And that was it, or so I thought. Because a week later, she texted again. Green was the right call. It was a date. His name's Eli. He smelled like cedar and stress. And I, some random dude who never said she had the wrong number, texted back, and we just kept texting. Every few days, then every day. For months. She never asked who I was. I never told her. It became this anonymous thread of support. When things went well, she'd send me updates. When things went badly, I'd hype her up, like I was her invisible best friend in the walls. Eventually, she named me Text Goblin. Then, one night in November, she sent this. "Okay, Goblin." I told him I love him, and he said it back. "I'm so scared. I feel like my heart is too big and soft for this world." I texted back something dumb, like, "He's lucky to have you." and green was still the right choice. Then I didn't hear from her for 2 months. I thought it was over. Until January. I found out who you are. I froze. You used your real Spotify once. That's how I found your playlist, then your profile. My heart dropped. I'm not mad. I actually have a question. Will you come to my wedding? As my text goblin. And that's how I ended up flying to Arizona last month, standing in a room full of strangers, watching a woman I've never met walk down the aisle, wearing a green ribbon in her hair and winking at me from across the crowd. We hugged after. She whispered, "Thank you for picking green." And I said, "It was always green." I do totally apologize because I forgot her real name, because I was so mesmerized by chaotic possible chances in the whole world, still saved in my phone as possibly chaos. Life is weird, but sometimes weird is kind.
The storm clouds had been rolling in for 20 minutes now. A dark, angry gray. I was sitting in the usual lifeguard chair, just waiting for the first peal of thunder so I could blow the whistle and order everyone out of the pool. The pool was crowded. It had been a scorching 92°F earlier, although now with the impending storm it had cooled down. I scanned the people swimming, a few scattered seniors, a whole boatload of rambunctious kids. Not a lot of young or childless people. I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to come here, either. Lightning shot across the sky. I grabbed the whistle and blew. Everyone made their way to the stairs. Some of the kids were screaming, upset that swim time was over. Oh, boo-hoo. A saggy old man hefted himself out of the pool. A cute mom in a bikini ran past to chase her running toddler. The thunder rumbled in. I felt the first few drops of rain hit my shoulders. I checked the time, almost 4:30. We had to keep everyone out of the pool for 30 minutes whenever we saw lightning. As the pool cleared out, though, I noticed there was one person who wasn't moving towards the exit. They were way at the deep end of the pool. Facing away from me, I think. I could only see their head above the water. Just a dark oval bobbing up and down on the surface. I grabbed my whistle and blew it again, angrily, shrilly. The head didn't react. And then I felt bad. This person could be deaf or hearing impaired. I climbed down from my post and started walking towards the deep end of the pool. Everyone else was out of the pool now. Most of them had cleared the area too, either going home or to the little snack bar we had at the far edge of the property. I stared at the head bobbing up and down, and a sick feeling took hold in my chest. Something felt off about it, but I couldn't put my finger on why. Another finger of lightning shot across the sky. "Excuse me," I called, from about 10 yards away. "You have to get out of the pool. There's a lightning." They didn't respond. I stepped forward, my heart starting to pound. Something is wrong here. Really, really wrong. If I were alone, I definitely would have run the other way. But there were still other lifeguards and tons of people back there. I stepped closer, and I could see them better. It was pretty dark from the storm, and the rain was now disturbing the surface of the pool, but it looked like a woman with long, dark hair, just treading water in the deep end of the pool. Why would you just float there like that, in the same position treading water? Even if she's deaf, didn't she notice everyone else in the deep end got out? Didn't she see the lightning? The rain picked up, starting to pelt down. The woman didn't seem to react. As I got closer, I could make out her soaking wet hair, melting into the pool, like she'd just dunked her head in. I could see her pale shoulders poking above the water. Wait. Unless she was wearing a pale beige bathing suit, she was naked under the water. Okay, this is bad. Really bad. I stopped and turned around to call out to Drew, the other lifeguard on duty. But when I turned, I froze. The entire pool area was empty. Not only empty, abandoned. The umbrellas were grayish and tattered. The wooden picnic tables were splintering. Even the pool water was murky green, darkening to black beneath the surface. What the hell? I must be dreaming. This can't be real. This can't. A splash made me turn back towards the woman. I looked up to see that she'd disappeared. Just a roiling, turbulent spot of water where she'd just been. What? Where'd she go? I immediately jumped away from the edge of the pool, in case she was coming towards me. But I didn't see her anywhere. I scanned the murky water, but it was impossible to see into it. Fuck this. I'm going home. I broke into a run towards the pool entrance. That's when I saw her. She was climbing out of the pool, taking the steps, one by one, at the shallow end. Her dark hair trailed all the way to her rear. Her skin looked impossibly white in the dark shadows from the storm, almost like she was faintly glowing. She turned and slowly, started making her way towards me. What do? I could try to run past her. There wasn't much space between her and the fence, though. I could run the other way around the pool and to the exit, but she'd just turn around and intercept me. And where is everyone? She was a little closer now. I could make out the 2 black dots of her eyes on her face. They were too dark, like her eyes were pure black, or like she just had hollow pits where her eyes should have been. I couldn't tell. I ran over to the fence. I stuck my foot in the chain link and began to climb. I could only do it because I wasn't wearing shoes, manipulating my toes through the gaps. I got halfway up and glanced back. Oh no. She was so much closer than I would have expected. Only about 15 feet away. She was naked and pale and bluish, like she'd drowned in the water. Her face was gaunt, her mouth hung open, and her eyes were pure black. I scrambled up the fence. A cold hand locked onto my ankle. I didn't look down. I couldn't. I knew it was her hand, yanking me back. I kicked and screamed. Let me go. I think my fear delighted her. I heard a little ch sound escape from her lips, as if she were laughing, but didn't quite know how. I kicked as hard as I could. I felt her fingernails claw into my ankle, but then I was free, and I scrambled the rest of the way up the fence. I plummeted to the ground. My body hit hard. I lay there for a second, gasping for breath. When I opened my eyes, the sounds of the pool returned. I sat up, and noticed I was still on the pool side of the fence. But all the people were back. The pool was clear. The storm was passing now, warm sunlight starting to brighten the shadows. Hey man, you okay? I looked up to see Drew standing over me. What happened? I dunno. You don't remember? Did you knock yourself out or something? What time is it? I croaked. 5:23. It was about 4:30 when I blew the whistle. I lost an hour. Did you see her? I asked. Who? That weird woman, in the deep end of the pool. She wasn't coming out when I blew the whistle. No, I don't think so. I went home rattled. But after dinner, I started to feel sick, too. A slight fever. Nauseous. I chalked it up to nerves, but it got worse and worse and worse. Until I was crouched over the toilet, gagging and retching. I'd thrown up everything and I was still retching, my entire body convulsing. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, something shot out of my mouth and plopped into the toilet. I should never have gone inside. I'd explored abandoned buildings before. It was a hobby of mine, the mystery, the legends, the idea of light rays shining through a broken window. It all drew me in, but this particular building made me rethink my interests. I'd been exploring the building for a solid 30 minutes. It was an old mansion. There had been stories of people hearing voices coming from inside. But that didn't stop me. I never believed the stories that made me explore, mainly because all of them had been duds. Anyway, I was trying to open a stubborn door when all the noise just stopped. Complete silence, the chirping of the birds, the sound of cars passing by, they were all just gone. It's like the world outside had just disappeared, even the dust. Reflecting the light seemed to freeze in place. The air felt heavy, like a car was on top of me. Then out of the corner of my eye I saw something move. I turned to see what it was, and just like that the sound was back, the birds, the cars, even the dust seemed to regain motion. I immediately scanned my surrounding looking for anything. At the time I tried rationalizing what just happened, The silence? An acoustic flaw in the building, a dead zone or something, I told myself. The thing I saw in the corner of my eye? Trick of the light, I told myself, but still I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. After I went back to trying the door, I wasn't going to let that ward me off. Eventually I got the door open. A bookshelf had fallen in front of the door handle being rusty didn't help either. After I was done exploring the room, which turned out to be a guest room, I started to look for the source of the thing in the corner of my eye. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't rationalize it. When I left the room, I saw a bookshelf tipped over that I swear was upright a few minuets ago. At this point it was getting dark. I had started exploring at evening, and I expected this to take a while, so I brought a flashlight. I was looking around when I heard a noise. I turned my flashlight toward the sound, then I saw it, bright glowing eyes, along with long sharp claws that wrapped around the corner of the wall. I didn't stick around to see more of it. I immediately turned and ran back to the guest room. I slammed the door shut behind me, immediately barricading it with furniture. I was in a cold sweat after seeing it. At first I was relieved that I got away, but then I realized that I was stuck. After that I listened for anything. The silence felt impossibly long, but then I heard it. Distorted screams and growls. It was faint at first, but it was getting louder and louder. Eventually it was right outside the door. It was banging the door. I thought it was going to break it down, but then it stopped. It was still there, but it was like it was looking for a way in. Whatever it was not happy I got away. I was catching my breath when I heard a loud crash. Then I looked over to the boarded-up window, where I saw those familiar glowing eyes. When it realized I saw it, it immediately started banging against the window, trying to break through. I had to find a way out. I couldn't go through the main door, as it would take too long to move the furniture I had placed in front of me. The very things I had used to protect myself are now putting me in danger. I quickly scanned the room. I saw a door leading to what I hoped was a hallway. I tried opening it, but the door handle was rusted. The thing was almost through, so I started kicking the door trying to open it. Luckily the wood was rotted, making it easy to get through. It wasn't a hallway like I hoped. My heart sank, but then I saw it, a hole in a wall, but that thing had made it through. I didn't hesitate to run through the hole. There was no time to. It wasn't a large hole though, so I has cut myself on a sharp piece of wood. I looked behind me and saw that it couldn't reach me. I took a moment to look around. I was in a dark hallway. I didn't recognize the R. I assumed it was an area behind a door. I couldn't seem to budge. Before I could catch my breath, I heard a loud bang. That thing had broken through the wall. I immediately ran, hoping the hallway lead to an exit. I looked behind me to get a better look at it. It was giant and lanky, along with those long, sharp claws and glowing eyes I had seen before, and its teeth were unbelievably sharp. Whatever that thing was, it was not natural. As I was running, I could hear its footsteps. They sounded heavy. I could hear what I can only assume were the floorboard cracking with each one of its steps. Eventually I saw a light and exit, but it was closing in. I ran as fast as I could and put as much power behind each step that I could. When I got out, I didn't stop running until I got to my car. I had barely gotten out with my life. If it wasn't for that rotten wood and that hole in the wall, I wouldn't have gotten away. Sometimes when I'm alone, that same silence I experienced that day happens again, and I can only hope my mind playing tricks on me. My entire town is obsessed with an app called Mimic. If someone you know is talking about Mimic, please don't let them download it. This all started when my family moved to this small logging town in the Pacific Northwest about a month ago, after my parents' messy divorce. To put it bluntly, my dad found nudes on my mom's phone from multiple guys in our town. She met them through various dating apps, and it destroyed him. He packed up me and my little brother and moved us as far away from our old life as possible, to one of those foggy mountain towns where everyone knows your business and the biggest excitement is usually the high school making it to regionals. Dad developed this intense hatred of technology after everything that happened. No smartphones, no social media, barely even lets us use his old laptop. As long as it's for homework, he'd say sternly. I get it. His world fell apart because of what he found on a phone. But it's made fitting in at our new school basically impossible. My first day, I noticed something that struck me as odd. Almost every student was wearing the exact same style of flannel shirt, rolled up sleeves at the elbow in this very specific way that looked almost ritualistic. They'd even tied their shoelaces in these elaborate flower-shaped knots that must have taken forever to master. It's from me, Mick, explained Jenny. She was assigned to be my hallway buddy for the first day of school. While her mood was chipper, she had this distant look in her eyes, like she was thinking about something else entirely while talking to me. Everyone's doing it. You should really get the app. I don't have a phone. She stared at me like I'd just told her I didn't have lungs. That's weird. How do you keep up with anything? That afternoon in the cafeteria, I felt an uneasy pit in my stomach form as I watched the other kids. Most of the students were eating their lunch in perfect synchronization. They'd take a bite, chew exactly 7 times, swallow, then repeat. After every swallow they would look at each other and laugh, like there was some hilarious inside joke that only a few of us weren't in on. The entire room moved like a hive mind, the sounds of coordinated chewing echoed off the walls. When I asked my lab partner about it, he just gave me the same empty smile Jenny had given me earlier and said, "Mimic challenge. You wouldn't understand." My reputation for being phoneless was spreading like a virus. My little brother Danny started complaining constantly at home. Everyone at school thinks I'm a freak. They all have phones and I'm the only kid without one. I can't do any of the challenges or trends. I just sit alone at lunch while everyone else stares at me. But Dad wouldn't budge. Every time Danny brought it up, Dad would get this look in his eyes and change the subject. I understood his trauma, but watching my 11-year-old brother become more isolated every day was heartbreaking. The challenges I observed at school started innocently enough. Kids would whisper about hashtag Flannel Friday and hashtag 7-Bite Challenge and hashtag Flower Knot Tuesday. Weird and robotic, but harmless. I figured it would blow over like every other social media trend. Then came hashtag Devious Licks. I was sitting in Mr. Frederick's biology class, taking notes on metamorphosis, when I felt something wet and warm slide across the back of my neck. I spun around to find Keith grinning at me with his tongue still slightly hanging out of his mouth. "Got you," he whispered, like we were playing some perverted game of tag. "What the hell is wrong with you? Devious Licks Challenge. You're supposed to laugh now. I got you." But I didn't laugh. Everyone around us glared intensely toward the interaction, most with their phones out. I was half expecting someone to stand up for me and call out his disgusting behavior, but even the teacher started to chuckle as he lifted his phone's camera toward my direction. He got you good. Within hours, students were creeping up behind each other everywhere. During lectures, in hallways, at lunch tables. The wet sound of tongues on necks became as common as locker doors slamming. The most disturbing part wasn't the licking itself, it was how the victims reacted. They'd dissolve into these manic fits of laughter, like getting licked by a stranger was the most hilarious thing that had ever happened to them. Next up was hashtag Rib Tickle. I sat in horror as students began jabbing pencils, pens, even sharpened wooden rulers into each other's sides during class. Instead of crying out or asking for help, the victims would double over in hysterical laughter as blood pooled underneath their shirt, creating a bloom of crimson in the cloth. "You got me. You totally got me," they'd wheeze, their eyes bright with joy. The teachers never tried to stop them. I noticed most of them checking their phones more frequently, scrolling through something with a distant expression and snarled lip. Things at home got worse too. Dad had been drinking more since the move, and Danny's constant complaints about not having a phone were wearing on everyone. Last Thursday night, it all came to a head. Danny was whining again about being left out at school, about needing a phone to fit in. Dad had already downed his 4th beer for the night, and I could see his jaw getting tighter with each complaint. "What do you want a phone for, huh?" He thrust himself out of the rocking chair, suddenly exploding, his voice slurring. "So you can send pictures of your small dick to half the girls in school." "Dad." I tried to intervene. He whipped around to face me, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Don't dad me. What about you? I bet you're just dying to post slutty little videos for all the boys on Mimic like your classmates, aren't you?" The room went dead silent. Dad's face turned white as he realized what he'd said. He paused for a moment, his mouth struggling to form the words his brain desperately wanted to say. After another moment, he stormed off to his room without another word, leaving Danny in tears and me wondering how the hell my dad knew about Mimic. I left for school the next day without giving my dad so much as a glance. He let out a weak, "Hi," as I walked down the stairs, but I didn't want to hear anything he had to say right now. I childishly held up my hand to cover the left side of my face, obscuring my peripheral view of him. I couldn't even look at him. A group of kids cornered me after last period, led by Jenny and a few others I'd seen around. They all had their phones out, with that same vacant look in their eyes that I'd been seeing for weeks. "We can't let you stay disconnected anymore," Jenny said in a voice that didn't quite sound like hers. "You need to see what you're missing." I struggled as two boys from a grade above mine grabbed my arms and pinned me against the lockers. "What are you doing?" I screamed. Jenny retorted, "It's for your own good. Do you really want to be an outcast your entire life? We serve everyone here at Smiley's. No exceptions. Part 1. Series. If you told high school me I'd end up working at a fast food restaurant after college, young me would be pretty upset. I had straight A's, a nice Ivy League college chosen, and a sweet scholarship. College went even better. I was getting A's in everything, was popular, and played sports. Everything was going my way. Until my accident. Turns out it's usually a good idea to look both ways before you cross the street. After a few months in a coma, things weren't looking great for me. Even after waking up, doctors told me that with the head trauma I experienced, I wouldn't be able to go back to school. Didn't stop me from trying, but they were right. That's a few $1,000s I won't get back. Going back to my hometown, my only option was to look for work. The problem is, no one wants to hire someone who can barely add numbers that go into the double digits. Things were looking rough until something caught my eye, an old tattered paper stapled to a power line that said, "Smiley's. Looking for late-night worker, no experience necessary." The bottom of the paper had a cartoon clown grinning wide, with the motto, "We serve everyone with a smile." Even though the paper was ancient, they were still hiring, the chipper voice on the phone told me. "We're always looking to hire here at Smiley's. Thanks for your application." I could practically hear the grin through the phone. "We've been desperately needing a late-night worker, and you sound like the perfect fit. Come by tomorrow night and we'll get you trained up for your first shift." While walking over for my training, I noticed the restaurant was located pretty far on the edge of town, which is probably why I'd never heard of it. Entering the empty store, I heard a cheerful voice say, "You must be the new hire. So good to meet you." My boss, who I later found out was named Ryan, was the definition of average. Think of the most regular guy you can think of, and you're thinking of Ryan. "Let me show you around and tell you a few of the rules," he said as he ushered me around the counter and into the kitchen. Overall, training was pretty simple. Thankfully, I'd worked a little in a restaurant before, so I was already familiar with the basics. How to cook chicken so it wouldn't kill anybody, stuff like that. But there were a few things Ryan told me that caught me off guard. Like how, when I'm done in the freezer, I should make sure to lock it and never open it if I hear banging from inside. And if the lights in the lobby start to flicker, I'm supposed to take one of the papers beneath the counter and burn it. There were a few other things, but I just finished up my shift and can barely keep my eyes open. I'll update this journal thing later. Doctors told me it might help to write down what happened every day to help with my memory or something. They probably explained it, but you know, head trauma, coma, I didn't think it was important enough to write down. Update. Something interesting happened. Who could have guessed? I originally thought the weird rules were some kind of new worker hazing ritual and didn't take them too seriously. Most shifts are pretty uneventful, with maybe a dozen people coming in on a busy night and barely 3 on a slow one. On one of the slower nights, I was sitting in the kitchen. Before you restaurant elitists start whining about sitting, I was in a coma for several months. I'm allowed to sit every now and then. When I saw the lights flickering in the lobby, what Ryan told me came to mind, and I chuckled. They weren't gonna get me this easily. I ignored it, and the flickering kept going for a few more minutes until suddenly, all the lights turned off. I jumped and slowly stood up, being careful not to bump into anything hot in the kitchen. Easier said than done. Turning on my phone's flashlight, I worked my way to the front counter. "Very funny guys, you got me, you can turn the lights on," I nervously said, glancing around. No one responded. I get it, I'm new, you have to play pranks on me. Super funny, I added, frustration starting to surface. Still no response. I walked into the lobby and fumbled for the light switch, flicking it a few times, but the store stayed shrouded in black. Suddenly, a loud bang came from behind me. It sounded like some pots or pans from the back fell. Hello, stuttered out of my mouth, my knees shaking. I fumbled behind me, hands grasping beneath the counter, looking for the papers and lighter Ryan told me about. While I was never superstitious, in that moment, all my logic and higher-level thinking went out the window. I've never been the brave type, and horror movies are a no for me. My hands found the paper and lighter, and I fumbled to flick it on, barely managing to light it without burning myself. My breathing slowed a little, and I waited anxiously for the lights to turn on. Nothing happened. I turned around, gazing at what little I could see from the light of the burning paper. Just barely, at the edge of the flame's glow, was the silhouette of someone. But just as my eyes were about to focus, the paper burned out. I yelled and ran as fast as I could to the manager's office, barely avoiding slipping on the greasy floors. Reaching the door and slamming it shut and locking it, I fumbled with my phone and quickly called 911. No answer. I called again. Still no answer. I leaned against the door and slid down, my legs shaking even more than before. Out of desperation, I called Ryan, a memory bubbling up about calling him if anything went wrong. Hello. How's the shift going, Andrew? Everything going well. Ryan's always cheerful voice said, shocking me with its loudness. Ryan, please help me. There's someone in the store, the lights aren't working, I can't call the police, I whispered desperately before getting interrupted. Son, did you forget what I told you during training? Burn the paper if the lights flicker, Ryan said, still cheerful as ever given the circumstance. I thought it was a prank. The lights turned off, and I burned the paper and nothing happened, I pleaded, hoping he was going to help. Well, obviously burning the paper after the lights go off isn't gonna do anything. You have to do it before they turn off. The burning is what scares off Bill from coming in. But once he's in, burning won't do anything to him. Bill. Ryan never mentioned that. And who would be scared of burning paper? A global warming activist? My mind was desperately looking for answers. Now that he's in the store, he won't leave without a stern removal. Where are you right now? Ryan asked. The manager's office, I whispered, desperately listening for any sounds from the kitchen. Good. Look in the drawer, there should be a crucifix in there. Now, I don't like using it, it tends to upset some of our special guests, but it works as a backup. What do you mean, crucifix? Am I in a horror movie? I whispered aggressively, trying to keep my voice down. Well, how else are you supposed to get Bill out? He said, as if he were answering a basic question like if the sky is blue. He won't hurt you, not as long as you have the crucifix. Just hold it out and walk around the kitchen until the lights turn on. With that, he hung up. Nervously, I fumbled around the room until I found the crucifix Ryan was talking about. Peeking out the door, I slowly walked into the pitch-black kitchen. Holding the crucifix in one hand and my phone flashlight in the other, I crept through the kitchen. Each step felt like a century. I pleaded silently that Ryan was right. Approaching the front counter, I heard what sounded like a sharp exhale coming from right in front of me, and suddenly, the lights turned on. My head quickly turned, scanning every part of the kitchen, but found nothing. Whatever had been there was gone now. I breathed a sigh of relief and wanted to sink to the floor, but then I heard honking coming from the drive-thru. I looked at the cameras and saw someone sitting at the window, waiting to order. From that shift on, I started listening to all the rules Ryan told me about. I already wrote down 2, but there were some more. If you hear something in the drive-thru headset talking about taking your soul, read the laminated paper by the window. If you find weird pieces of unidentifiable meat mixed in with the fried chicken, fry it in the special fryer and then put it in the bottom of the warmer for our special guests. Speaking of guests, Ryan told me it's incredibly important that no matter what, we always serve everyone, regardless. They really take the whole, we serve everyone with a smile, to heart. Now, before you judge me for not quitting on the spot, the job paid really well, and it was the only place that would hire me. Ryan promised nothing bad would happen as long as I followed the rules. And honestly, I was curious. I found out that some of the store's regular visitors usually get a name. I already had the pleasure of meeting Bill, and apparently, there are quite a few more, but Ryan said he'd tell me about them later. That's all I can write for now. I try to record some of my other encounters with the visitors of this store whenever I get the displeasure of meeting them. The man living inside the abandoned elementary school took my best friend. I met my best friend Jacob in the 6th grade when we were both 12. I was at a new school and didn't know anyone. As an awkward, nerdy, acne-ridden kid, it was no surprise that I spent months on my own. My mom, worried about the early death of my social life, made me go to my school's middle school dance. As expected, I sat there alone most of the night, sipping Kool-Aid and eating out of what had to be the world's smallest bag of chips. That's when I met him. He sat next to me awkwardly and spoke muffled, almost to himself. He pointed to my t-shirt featuring a faded drawing of Sans and said he also liked Undertale. Not long after, we became inseparable. We would do everything together. My mom was so glad I had a friend, she let Jacob come over pretty much every weekend. It helped that she got along well with Jacob's mom. They'd often catch up for hours after Jacob got dropped off. Life was good, and for the last time in my life, I was truly happy. One day after school, we found ourselves watching scary urban exploration videos on my dad's old computer. We noticed that one of the places in the video was a local abandoned elementary school. Now I know how infamous it was, but all we learned from that YouTube scholar at the time was that it was shut down after some kids went missing when the school was still open. It was then that we naively decided to seek it out and explore it for ourselves. We figured that maybe we could find something that nobody else had. It was a pipe dream that seemed plausible to our underdeveloped 12-year-old minds. We began to set up our master plan after we saw that video. We decided then and there that we would make it to that school, and we did. We told our parents we'd be going down to Main Street to get some food after school one day. We lived in a small town, so our town's Main Street was just a short walk away. After doing some research online, we found out that the abandoned elementary school was just past the woods behind the school which we currently attended. Jacob's mom was going to pick us up from the Pizza Hut in town at 7, and our school day ended at 3. That gave us about 4 hours to get in, see what we could find, and get out. Instead of our school books, pencils, and notebooks, we packed our back with flashlights, extra batteries, snacks, and bottles of water. Most of which would remain unused. Our school was so small, we were able to sneak away without any fuss. We didn't have much staff, and most of them were busy dealing with the hordes of middle schoolers, so 2 quiet nerds like us could sneak under the radar. We made our way out through the car rider line, and traced along the edge of the building out back towards the woods. The sun sat on top of the tree line, like a ominous timer reminding us to complete our mission before it disappeared beyond the horizon. We made our way through the woods, getting slightly cut up and itchy due to the underbrush. We made random howling noises to try and creep each other out, but just ended up laughing at one another. We remarked how we didn't see a single animal, not even a squirrel. We came across a few odd things as we hiked through the woods. The first was a campsite, which we left alone as our fear of messing with adults was greater than any other. The second was a rickety old deer stand. After daring Jacob to climb to the top multiple times, he caved and very, very captiously climbed up the handmade ladder. He made it to the top, and his fear changed to wonder. He said in awe that he could see the school from up there. Before he got down, he picked up a pair of binoculars off the floor of the deer stand. He pointed them towards the school and laughed, saying he could see everyone going to the buses, and even into some of the classrooms. I told him to hurry up, and he took the binoculars and again, very, very captiously climbed his way back down. He pocketed his new binoculars, despite my hesitation, parading them around like he'd been a prospector who just found gold. Deciding I couldn't change his mind, We continued on our way. It didn't take long for us to reach the elementary school. Even in the daylight, we didn't notice it until we came up face to face with its brick exterior. The overgrowth was climbing up its decaying walls, barely holding on to life. We made our way up to a window and peeked in. Books and desks were randomly scattered throughout the inside of the classroom. A shelf was lying on its face, covered in mold and sitting in a pool of water that probably hadn't seen the light of day in decades. We failed to open the window, so we made our way down the side of the building. Eventually, we found a door. It was propped open with a cinder block, and we quietly rejoiced at how lucky we were. We made our way in through the door and found ourselves inside what looked like the teacher's office. We giggled to ourselves. Even though the school was abandoned, we felt as if we were breaking the rules by being in that room. We agreed to look around the room, which was for the most part, still intact. We found what we referred to as some boring old documents, and not much more. Jacob found a mug that said, "World's Best Teacher," and pretended to sip out of it. He laughed and remarked how stupid it is for someone to forget a mug like that. We shared another laugh and agreed to explore elsewhere. We made our way down the empty halls, a feeling of unease crawling under my skin as we roamed the empty, silent hallways. The inside of the building was a stark contrast to the outside. It looked relatively untouched by the oppressive forest just beyond the school's walls. Suddenly, a loud crash came from one of the classrooms behind us. We screamed and turned around, seeing a door open and slowly hit the wall next to it. We slowly inched our way to the classroom, Jacob brandishing a book he picked up of the book, ready to throw it at anything that jumped out at us. Jacob rounded the corner and looked into the room, yelling something unintelligible as he reared the book back. He stopped and said nothing was there. I came around the corner behind him, and there indeed was nothing there. It was empty. The teacher's desk sat in the corner, the desks sat in various formations, and there were even some toys and various utensils scattered along the floor. There was a large metal filing cabinet that lay in the corner. We made our way over to it. As we did, we saw a small hole in the wall behind it. We threw away our fear and excitedly jogged our way over to it, hoping to find some hidden treasure. When we got close and peered in, we were disappointed. It was just a bunch of children's clothes. We brushed it off and made our way out the room, exploring a few rotting classrooms and supply closets as we made our way down the corridor. At the end of the hall, we came to the steel double doors that lead to the gym. We used our combined strength to push through the rust accumulating on its hinges. We looked around the gym in awe. Even though it was an elementary school, the gym was much bigger than ours. Though long abandoned, we could tell how nice and well kept it used to be. He dared me to race around the gym, and I agreed. After getting barely over halfway, I stopped, already out of breath. Jacob stopped soon after. We were definitely not the athletic type. We hazed each other for our lackluster performances before continuing our expedition. Once we got to the back of the gym, to what used to be the coach's office. The blinds in the window were still down, so we couldn't see inside. We tried the handle, and were surprised to find it unlocked. As we went into the office, we were shocked. It looked untouched. Like, literally untouched. A mug sat on the desk which still had magazines on it, somewhat neatly stacked together. On closer inspection, the mug had some water in it. It was clean and clear. Jacob, who was exploring the other side of the office, called me over with a childish giddiness coating his voice. Making my way over to him, I saw what he found so funny. It was a sleeping bag, open and slightly ruffled. I still remember what he said. What kind of teacher sleeps in his own office? Our conversation was soon broken by a faint sound. It was out of place, and made our hair stand on end. Footsteps, and they were approaching us. Just barely noticeable, as if someone was trying, and failing, to sneak up on us. We looked at each other, fear painted on both of our faces, and our minds rushed on what to do. Jacob took my arm and dragged me to the supply closet at the end of the room. He shut the door, trying not to make any noise. As the door came to a close, we became submerged in an inky darkness. I tore off my backpack and nervously searched around for my flashlight with shaking hands. Taking it out, I fumbled with the light, trying desperately to turn it on. I began to pace around, but as soon as I took a step back, I heard a loud, popping crack coming from the ground beneath my feet. Then, silence. Loud, deafening silence. As I turned the flashlight on, I dragged it over to the location of the noise. A small leg bone sat beneath my foot, cracked and broken. I dragged my gaze up and looked into the eyes of a small, decaying body. A child, not much younger than I was. Rotten decayed skin hung from the bones, which were stained a dark reddish-brown. Their clothes were caked in blood and other indescribable fluids. The head was caved in, mangled and torn skin grafted onto the sick, rotten bone. The light began shaking in my hands. The body, although unmoving, looked as if it wanted to scream for help. It didn't scream, but I did. A loud, broken yell escaped my mouth. I almost didn't know I was screaming until Jacob tried to get me to stop, shaking me as tears fell down his eyes. He was quietly yelling at me, which was muffled and far. He grabbed my arm and bolted for the doorway, halting my screams. That's when I caught on to the loud, bolting footsteps coming straight for the door of the room we were in. Without hesitation, Jacob pushed the door open with all the force his small frame could muster. As soon as he did, I saw him. A large man stumbled back, reaching for us. As we pushed past him, he shouted something at us. Not a word, but an inhuman grunt that was more reminiscent of a monster than any human creature. I did not look back, and sprinted along with Jacob as fast as our little legs could run. Beads of sweat ran down my face, melding with tears and viscous snot. But something was wrong. I didn't see Jacob beside me. I turned to see Jacob on the floor just a few yards behind me, lying on the floor, clutching his foot. I screamed at him to get up when I realized there was blood pooling around his foot. He had stepped on a rusty nail, which had burrowed its way deep into his foot, stretching the cloth on top of his shoe. He groaned and cried from the pain, trying to stop the bleeding in that fleeting moment. I tried to run to him, but fear anchored me to my spot on the floor. The man, or whatever it was running towards Jacob, and it didn't take him long to get to him. His large hand wrapped around Jacob's arm, ripping him off the floor. He screamed, kicking and flailing with all his might, but the man was like a wall of stone, cold and unmoving. I saw his face, warped terror and anguish mixed together, an expression that should have been alien to a child of his age. Then I bore witness to the thing that has haunted my dreams ever since that night. The face of the thing that took Jacob. Whatever it was, deep down, it was not human. There was no humanity behind its eyes. I left him there to die. I could not face that thing. I turned and ran out of the school, back through the halls, and out of the teacher's lounge. I didn't dare to look back, not even for a second. I hadn't realized how quickly it had become dark outside. I could barely see, my flashlight bobbing and shaking violently as I sprinted at full speed in one direction. As I ran through the woods, I tripped several times and bruised the hell out of myself. Every time I did so, I thought I'd look behind me and see it standing there. But I never did. As I ran out of the woods and towards the school, I was lucky enough to run into the school's bus driver/custodian, Mr. Henry, who immediately called the police upon seeing me in that state. He consoled me as best he could until the police arrived. When I told my account to the police and our mothers, I lied. I told them we got turned around while playing in the woods, and I lost track of Jacob as we were trying to find our way back. I was too terrified to even think of that place, of that thing, let alone mention it to other people. His mother, a single parent, never recovered. She took her life a year after he went missing. After losing her husband just a few years earlier, the loss of her child was the straw that broke the camel's back. I just wish I told her the truth before she passed. I never saw Jacob again. I'm only confessing this here and now, because they found his body. I don't know how, but when I turned on my TV this morning, there he was, on the news broadcast. He was mangled, bloodied, and defiled. His head was caved in, beaten into a dark void of blood and bone. He was nothing but a shell of my best friend. I cried, and cried, and cried some more. Then terror struck as I came to the most horrible realization of my short life. I used to have a house in the Appalachian Mountains, and I have some stories to tell. Recently I've seen creepy stories of mysterious creatures living in the depths of the Appalachian Mountains blow up on TikTok, so I wanted to share some stories I have of when I lived there. So, to set the scene, I used to have a house on the Maryland side of the Appalachian Mountains. We were pretty much completely stranded there, as the nearest neighbor was around 15 miles away, so we had to either go on huge supply runs to the nearest supermarket, which was even farther away, or hunt for food ourselves. Also, I forgot to mention, my mom always dreamt of going into a house or cabin in the deep woods, so we decided to live there for me and my sister's summer. Anyway, we alternated between hunting and going for supply runs. Now, I'll start telling the stories. The first one is when me and my mom went for a hike through the woods and found an abandoned Wild West amusement park called Ghost Town, probably like 20 minutes into the hike. Once we got there, we got a weird feeling that I cannot physically describe with words. Like it just somehow appeared in front of us. Then probably no more than 15 minutes later, we found a huge abandoned hospital. We never knew it for the rest of our stay, but those two buildings were the Ghost Town Village located in North Carolina and the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. We started in Maryland, somehow ended up in North Carolina, and then got to West Virginia and got back to Maryland in less than 2 hours. We stayed surrounded by woods the whole time, not crossing or seeing a single road. That was just the start of the weird shit that happened. The next story is when my mom took me and my sister to a supply run, and while we were driving we saw a man with a thick jacket, glasses, a balaclava over his face, and a bicycle helmet trying to hitchhike with his thumb out. It was the middle of summer. Me and my sister told my mom to just keep driving, but she pulled over in the road and asked the guy, "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't respond. "Why are you out here dressed like that?" The man finally spoke, but something was off. His voice didn't sound like it belonged to him. It was too high, like it was put through a voice changer. "Ma'am, can I get a ride?" Completely disregarding my mom's question. I looked around him and noticed he had no bike, no car, no hiking stick, no backpack, no nothing. Just those clothes. I whispered to my mom to keep driving, and as soon as the man saw that she was trying to drive away, he let out an animalistic inhuman scream and started to run towards us. My mom floored it to the nearest police station and reported the guy, but they never found him. On our way back to the house, we were on extreme edge. But nothing happened. Then that night, I woke up to a tapping sound on my window, and woke up to the same man standing straight up with his hands on the glass. I lived on the second floor. Now, he didn't have his sunglasses on, he also didn't have his eyes. When I noticed it, it immediately fell, and when I looked out my window for it, I didn't see anything. No man, no creature, nothing. Like he just disappeared. I was so shocked and scared I hid under my covers the rest of the night, even though I was 16 at the time. I peeked my head up occasionally to make sure he never came back. Then in the morning I told my mom about it, but it's not like she could do anything about it. The police would never find it, and my parents weren't going out there. This was terrifying, but nothing compared to the next story. I forgot to mention, but we had a dog named Mac. He was a golden retriever and was super friendly and helped us retrieve the animal carcasses when we hunted. One day I was out hunting with my dad, and we killed a couple rabbits and sent Mac to go get them, but we heard him bark, like he was telling us to go to him instead. We walked over to where he was barking and saw a tree covered with dead, skinned rabbits, each with a shark stick through their head and their eyes removed with a weird symbol carved into the tree. We were speechless and covered our mouths in shock, and then we heard someone whisper to us, "Hey guys, come over here." We hooked up Mac to his emergency leash and ran as fast as we could to our house. I looked behind me for who whispered to us and saw a man with a huge smile on his face and his eyes as wide as possible for a human to open them, staring at me, and then began to run towards us with a knife. My dad grabbed his hand pistol and shot him in the leg, and he fell to the floor while yelling in pain. Once we reached the house we called the police and told them about it, and they sent multiple officers to search the area, but found nothing. Not the rabbits, no blood, no knife, no fingerprints, not even the rabbits we killed. For the next couple months we stayed in a relative's house. None of us felt safe anymore. But my dad, the one who shot the crazy man, was the only one who insisted we stay. Said we could defend ourselves. Said it was just another crazy and that we should stay the rest of the summer. We agreed but said if anything else weird or terrifying happens, we go to our house in the city. Then, the final story is what made us finally move out. One Saturday, I woke up and saw my mom missing from the house. My dad and sister said she was just going on an errand, and that she'll be back in the afternoon. Afternoon came and she got back. Nothing else eventful happened that day, until night struck. We let Mac out, we just thought he was gonna go to the bathroom and come back, but we heard him run away deep into the woods, like he was chasing something. I don't know why we didn't chase after him even after our creepy encounters before this. When he got back, he wasn't energetic. He wasn't acting like him at all. He was mopey, sad, and acting really weird. Normally we would have just assumed he saw something in the woods that made him upset, but after the previous events, we were on edge. Then when we all fell asleep, I woke up to footsteps coming up the stairs. I peeked out my door and saw Mac. Standing up like a human, his fur gray, his arms longer than they should be, and his head twisted and upright. His walking wasn't right either. He would walk one step, and his body would flop in the direction he stepped. He wasn't walking towards anything either, just roaming the hallway. My heart was beating out of my chest and I called my sister, and after calling her 4 times, she finally picked up. I don't remember anything I said to her, but what I do remember is sneaking behind the thing pretending to be Mac and met up with my sister. Luckily, the rest of my family slept downstairs, so once I met up with my sister, we were able to wake our parents without going past it. Logically, we stayed in the nearest hotel for the night. We had to go back and get our stuff though, so we went back to the house and found it trashed. The food in the fridge was scattered all over the house, and once we got our stuff, we drove away. I looked back to the house and saw the man, the thing in the winter clothes, staring at me. It was the thing pretending to be Mac. We drove back to our city house and never stepped foot into woods again. Each summer, a child will disappear into the forest, only coming back after a year has passed. 30 minutes later, a different child will emerge from that forest, last seen exactly 1 year prior. This cycle has been going on for decades, and it needs to be stopped. Child abuse. 3 years ago, Amelia awoke to find dozens of ticks attached to her body, crawling over her bedroom windowsills and through the floorboards just to get a small taste of her precious blood. That's how we knew my sister had been selected. She was ecstatic. Everyone was, actually. Our classmates, our teachers, the mailman, our town's deacon, the kind Colombian woman who owned the grocery store, they were all elated by the news. Amelia's a great kid, a real fine specimen. Makes total sense to me, my grandpa remarked, his tone swollen with pride. Even our parents were excited, in spite of the fact that their only daughter would have to live alone in the woods for an entire year, doing God only knows to survive. The night of the summer solstice, Amelia would leave, and the previous year's selected would return, passing each other for a brief moment on the bridge that led from Camp Ehrlich to an isolated plateau of land known as Glass Harbor. You see, being selected was a great honor. It wasn't some overblown, richest kid wins popularity contest, either. There were no judges to bribe, no events to practice for, no lucky winners or shoo-ins for the esteemed position. Selection was pure because nature decided. You were chosen only on the grounds that you deserved the honor. An unbiased evaluation of your soul, through and through. The town usually had a good idea who that person was by early June. Once nature decided, there was no avoiding their messengers. Amelia could have bathed in a river of insect repellent, and it wouldn't have made a damn bit of difference. The little bloodsuckers would have still been descending upon her in the hundreds, thirsty for the anointed crimson flowing through her veins. Every summer around the campfire, the counselors would close out their explanation of the selection process with a cryptic mantra. 17 words that have been practically branded on the inside of my skull, given how much I heard them growing up. Those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential. Those who return a year later are perfect. Amelia was so happy. I vividly remember her grinning at me, warm green eyes burning with excitement. Although I smiled back at her, I found myself unable to share in the emotion. I desperately wanted to be excited for my sister. Maybe then I'd finally feel normal, I contemplated. Unfortunately, that excitement never arrived. No matter how much I learned about selection, no matter how many times the purpose of the ritual was explained, no matter how much it seemed to exhilarate and inspire everyone else, the tradition never sat right with me. Thinking about it always caused my guts to churn like I was seasick. I reached over the kitchen table, thumb and finger molded into a pincer. While Amelia gushed about the news, there had been a black and brown adult deer tick crawling across her cheek. The creature's movements were unsteady and languid, probably on account of it being partially engorged with her blood already. It creeped closer and closer to her upper lip. I didn't want the parasite to attach itself there, so I was looking to intervene. Right as I was about to pinch the tiny devil, my mother slapped me away. Hard. I yelped and pulled my hand back, hot tears welling under my eyes. When I peered up at her, she was standing aside the table with her face scrunched into a scowl, a plate of bacon in one hand and the other pointed at me in accusation. "Don't you dare, Thomas. We've taught you better." I understand feeling envious, but that's no excuse. I didn't bother explaining what I was actually feeling. Honestly, being skeptical of selection, even if that skepticism was born out of a protective instinct for my older sister, would have sent my mother into hysterics. It was safer for me to let her believe I was envious. Instead, I just nodded. Her scowl unfurled into a tenuous smile at the sight of my contrition. "Look at me, honey. You're special too, don't worry," she said. The announcement was sluggish and monotonous, like she was having a difficult time convincing herself of that fact, let alone me. I struggled to maintain eye contact, despite her request. My gaze kept drifting away. Nightmarish movement in the periphery stole my attention. As Mom was attempting to reassure me, I witnessed the tick squirm over the corner of Amelia's grin and disappear into her mouth. My sister didn't even seem to notice. Like I said, she was ecstatic. Every kid between the ages of 7 and 17 spent their summer at Camp Ehrlich, no exceptions. From what I remember, no one seemed to mind the inflexibility of that edict. Our town had a habit of churning out some pretty affluent people, and they'd often give back to the camp that gave them everything with sizable grants and donations. Because of that, the campgrounds were both luxurious and immaculately maintained. 8 tennis courts, 2 baseball fields, a climbing wall, an archery range, indoor bunks with AC, a roller hockey rink, etc., etc., etc. I won't bore you with a comprehensive list of every ostentatious amenity. The point is, we all loved it. How could we not? I suppose that was the insidious trick that propped up the whole damn system. 95% of the time, Camp Ehrlich was great. It was like an amusement park/recreation center hybrid that was free for us to attend because it was a town requirement. A child's paradise hidden in the wilderness of northern Maine, mandated for use by the local government. The other 5% of the time, however, they were indoctrinating us. It was a perfectly devious ratio. The vast majority of our days didn't involve discussing selection. They sprinkled it in gently. It was never heavy-handed, nor did it bleed into the unrelated activities. A weird assembly one week, a strange arts and crafts session the next, none of them taking us away from the day-to-day festivities long enough to draw our ire. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. The key was they got to us young. Before we could even understand what we were being subjected to, their teachings started to make a perverse sort of sense. Selection is just an important tradition, a unique part of our town's history that other people may not understand, but that doesn't make it wrong. Every prom designates a king and queen, right? Most jobs have an employee of the month. The selected are no different. Special people, with a special purpose, on a very special day. The selected don't leave forever. No, they always come back to us, safe and sound. Better, actually. Think about all the grown-ups that were selected when they were kids, and all the important positions they hold now. Senators, scientists, lawyers, physicians, CEOs. Isn't our town just great? Aren't we all so happy? Shouldn't we want to spread that happiness across the world? That would be the neighborly thing to do, right? Every prom designates a king and queen, right? Most jobs have an employee of the month. The selected are no different. Special people, with a special purpose, on a very special day. The selected don't leave forever. No, they always come back to us, safe and sound. Better, actually. Think about all the grown-ups that were selected when they were kids, and all the important positions they hold now. Senators, scientists, lawyers, physicians, CEOs. Isn't our town just great? Aren't we all so happy? Shouldn't we want to spread that happiness across the world? That would be the neighborly thing to do, right? What a load of bullshit. Couldn't tell you exactly why I was born with an immunity to the propaganda. Certainly didn't inherit it from my parents. Didn't pick it up from any wavering friends, either. There was just something unsettling about the selection ceremony. I always felt this invisible frequency vibrating through the atmosphere on the night of the summer solstice. A cosmic scream emanating from the land across the bridge, transmitting a blasphemous message that I could not seem to hide from. The selected endured unimaginable pain during their year on Glass Harbor. It changed them. And it wasn't for their benefit. It wasn't really for ours, either. Okay, so, tell me, who was the first selected? I demanded. The amphitheater went silent, and the camp counselor directing the assembly glared at me. Kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Amelia rested a pale, pleading hand on top of mine, her fingers dappled with an assortment of differently sized ticks, like she was flaunting a collection of oddly shaped rings. Tom, please, don't make a fuss. She whimpered. For better or worse, I ignored her. It was a week until the summer solstice, and I had become progressively more uncomfortable with the idea of losing my sister to Glass Harbor for an entire goddamn year. How do you mean? The counselor asked from the stage. Rage sizzled over my chest like a grease burn. He knew what I was getting at. I mean, you're explaining it like there's always been a swap. One selected leaves Camp Ehrlich, one selected returns from Glass Harbor. But that can't have been the case with the first person. It doesn't make sense. There wouldn't have been anyone already on Glass Harbor to swap with. So, my question is, who was the first selected? Who left Camp Ehrlich to live on Glass Harbor without the promise of being swapped out a year down the road? It was a reasonable question, but those sessions weren't intended to be a dialogue. I could practically feel everyone praying that I would just shut up. The counselor, a lanky, bohemian-looking man in his late 50s, forced a smile onto his face and began reciting a contentless hodgepodge of buzzwords and platitudes. Well, Tom, selection is a tradition older than time. It's something we've always done, and something we'll always continue to do, because it's making the world a better place. You see, those who leave for Glass Harbor have perfect potential, and those who... I interrupted him. I couldn't stand to hear that classic tagline. Not again. Not while Amelia sat next to me, covered in parasites, nearly passing out from the constant exsanguination. You're not answering my question. But fine, if you don't like that one, here's a few others. How does selection make the world a better place? Why haven't we ever been told what the selected do on Glass Harbor? How do they change? Why don't the selected who return tell us anything about the experience? And for Christ's sake, how are we all comfortable letting this happen to our friends and family? I gestured towards Amelia, a pallid husk of the vibrant girl she used to be, slumped lifelessly in her chair. The counselor snapped his fingers and looked to someone at the very back of the amphitheater. Seconds later, I was violently yanked to my feet by a pair of men in their early 20s and dragged outside against my will. They didn't physically hurt me, but they did incarcerate me. I spent the next 7 days locked in one of the treatment rooms located in the camp's sick bay. Unfortunately, maybe intentionally, they placed me in a room on the 3rd floor, facing the south side of Camp Ehrlich. That meant I had an excellent view of the ritual grounds, an empty plot of land at the edge of camp. A cruel choice that only became crueler when the summer solstice finally rolled around. As the sun fell, I paced around the room in the throes of a panic attack. I slammed my fists against the door, imploring them to let me out. I'm sorry for the way I behaved. Really, I wasn't thinking straight. I begged. Just, please, let me see Amelia one last time before she goes. No response. There was no one present in the sick bay to hear my groveling. Everyone, the staff, the kids, the counselors, were all gathered on the ritual grounds. No less than 1,000 people singing, lighting candles, laughing, hugging, and dancing. I watched one of the elders trace the outline of Amelia's vasculature on her legs and arms in fine, black ink. A ceremonial marking to empower the 16-year-old for the journey to come. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help myself. The crowd went eerily silent and averted their eyes from Amelia and the pathway that led out of Camp Ehrlich, as was tradition. For the first time in my life, I did not follow suit. My eyes remained pressed against the glass window, glued to my sister. She was clearly weak on her feet. She lumbered forward, stumbling multiple times as she pressed on, inching closer and closer to the forest. As instructed, she followed the light of the candles into a palisade of thick, ominous pine trees. Supposedly, the flickering lights would guide her to the bridge. And then, Amelia was gone. Swallowed whole by the shadow-cast thicket. I never got to say goodbye. 30 minutes later, another figure appeared at the forest's edge. Damien, last year's selected, walked quietly into view. He then rang a tiny bell he'd been gifted before leaving 365 days prior. That's all the counselors ever gave the selected. No food, no survival gear, no water. Just an antique handbell with a rusted, greenish bell bearing. The crowd erupted at the sound of his return. Once the festivities died down, they finally let me out of my cage. Over the next year, I continued to feel the repercussions of my outburst. When I arrived home from camp in the fall, my parents were livid. They had been thoroughly briefed on my dissent. Dad screamed. Mom refused to say anything to me at all. Grandpa just held a look of profound sadness in his eyes, though I'm not sure that was entirely because of his disappointment in me. I think he missed Amelia. God, I did too. None of my classmates RSVP'd for my 14th birthday party. Not sure if their parents forbade them from attending, or if they themselves didn't want to be associated with a social pariah. Either way, the rejection was agonizing. For a while, I was broken. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Didn't really think much. No, I simply carried my body from one place to another. Kept up appearances as best I could. Unilateral conformity seemed like the only route to avoiding more pain. One night, that all changed. I was cleaning out the space under my bed when I found it. The homemade booklet felt decidedly fragile in my hands. I sneezed from inhaling dust, and I nearly ended up snapping the thing in half. When Amelia and I were kids, back before I'd even been introduced to Camp Ehrlich, we used to make comics together. The one I cradled in my hands detailed a highly stylized account of how me and her had protected a helpless turtle from a shark attack at the beach. In the climatic panels, Amelia roundhouse kicked the creature's head while I grabbed the turtle and carried it to safety. Beautifully dumb and tragically nostalgic, that booklet reawakened me. She really was my best friend. At first, it was just sorrow. I hadn't felt any emotions in a long while, so even the cold embrace of melancholy was a relief. That sorrow didn't last, however. In the blink of an eye, it fell to the background, outshined by this blinding supernova of white-hot anger. I shot a hand deeper under the bed, procured my old little league bat, gripped the handle tightly, and beat my mattress to a pulp. Battered the poor thing with wild abandon until my breathing turned ragged. The primordial catharsis felt amazing. Not only that, but I derived a bit of a wisdom from the tantrum. What I did wasn't too loud, and I expressed my discontent behind closed doors. A tactical release of rage, in direct comparison to my outburst at Camp Ehrlich the summer before. Expressing my skepticism like that was short-sighted. It felt like the right thing to do, but God was it loud. Not only that, but the display outed me as a non-believer, and what did I have to show for it? Nothing. Amelia still left for Glass Harbor, and none of my questions received answers. Because of course they didn't. The people who kept this machine running wouldn't be inclined to give out that information just because I asked with some anger stewing in my voice. If I wanted answers, I'd need to find them myself. And I'd need to do it quietly. 4 months later, I was back at Camp Ehrlich. Thankfully, the counselors hadn't decided to confine me as a prophylactic measure on the night of the solstice. I did a good job convincing them of my newfound obedience, so they allowed me to participate in the festivities. That year's selected was only 10 years old, a shy boy named Henry. I watched with a covert disgust as the counselors helped him take his iron pills every morning, trying to counterbalance the anemic effects of his infestation. Everyone bowed their heads and closed their eyes. As I listened to the sad sounds of Henry softly plodding into the forest, I reviewed what I'd learned about Glass Harbor through my research. Unfortunately, I hadn't found much. Maybe there wasn't much out there to find, or maybe I wasn't scouring the right corners of the internet. What I discovered was interesting, sure, but it didn't untangle the mystery by any stretch of the imagination, either. Still, it had been better than finding nothing, and Amelia was due to return that night. I wanted to arm myself with as much knowledge as humanly possible before I saw her again. Glass Harbor was about 2 square miles of rough, uninhabited terrain. A plateau situated above a freshwater river running through a canyon hundreds of feet below. The only easy way onto the landmass was a wooden bridge built back in the 1950s. At one point, there had been plans to construct a water refinery on Glass Harbor. Multiple news outlets released front-page articles espousing how beneficial the project was going to be for the community, both from a financial and from a public health perspective. Clean water and fresh money for a better community, one of the titles read. All that hubbub, all that media coverage, and then nothing. Not a peep. No reports on how construction was progressing. No articles on the refinery's completion. For some reason, the project just vanished. It has to be related, I thought. The ticks draining blood, the idea of a water refinery, there's a connection there. A replacement of fluid. Detoxification or something. Truthfully, I was grasping at straws. Amelia will fill in the rest for me. I'm sure of it. I was so devastating naive back then. None of the selected ever talk about what transpires on Glass Harbor. It's considered very disrespectful to ask them about it, too. But it's Amelia, I rationalized. She'll tell me. Of course she'll tell me. The somber chiming of a tiny handbell rang through the air. My head shot up and there she was, standing tall on the edge of the forest. Amelia looked healthy. Vital. Her skin was pest-free and no longer pale. She wasn't emaciated. Her body was lean and muscular. She was wearing the clothes that she left in, blue jeans and a black Mars Volta t-shirt, but they weren't dirty. No, they appeared pristine. There wasn't a single speck of dirt on her outfit. We all leapt to our feet, cheering. For a second, I felt normal. Elated to have my sister back. But before I could truly revel in the celebration, a similar frequency assaulted my ears. That horrible cosmic scream. From the back of the crowd, I stared at my sister, wide-eyed. There was something wrong with her. I just knew it. My attempts to badger Amelia into discussing her time on Glass Harbor proved fruitless over the following few weeks. I started off subtle. I hinted to her that I knew about the watery refinery in passing. Nudged her to corroborate the existence of that enigmatic building. You must have come across it, I whispered one night, waiting for her to respond from the top bunk of our private cabin. I know she heard me, but she pretended to be asleep. Adolescent passion is such a fickle thing. I was so headstrong initially, so confident that Amelia and I would crack the mysteries of selection wide open. But when she continued to stonewall me, my once voracious confidence was completely snuffed out. Emotionally exhausted and profoundly forlorn, I let it go. At the end of the day, Amelia did come back. Mostly. If I didn't think about it, I was often able to convince myself that she never left in the first place. On the surface, she acted like the sister I'd lost. Her smile was familiar, her mannerisms nearly identical. But she was different, even if it was subtle. An encounter I had with her early one August morning all but confirmed that fact. I woke up to the sounds of muffled retching coming from the bathroom, followed by whispering, and then again, retching. I creeped out of bed. Neon red digits on our cabin's alarm clock read 4:58 a.m. I tiptoed over to the bathroom door, careful to avoid the floorboards that I knew creaked under pressure. More retching. More whispering. I could tell it was Amelia's voice. For some inexplicable reason though, the bathroom lights weren't flicked on. As gently as I could, I pushed the door open. My eyes scoured the darkness, searching for my sister. Given the retching, I expected to see her huddled up in front of the toilet, but she wasn't there. Eventually, I landed on her silhouette. She was inside the shower with the sliding glass door closed, sitting on the floor with her back turned away from me. Honestly, I have a hard time recalling the exact order of what happened next. All I remember vividly is the intense terror that coursed through my body, heart thumping against my rib cage, cold sweat dripping down my feet and onto the tile floor, hands tremoring with a manic rhythm. "Amelia, are you all right?" I whimpered. The whispering and retching abruptly stopped. I grabbed the handle and slid the glass door to the side. A musty odor exploded out from the confined space. It was earthy but also rotten smelling, like algae on the surface of a lake. My eyes immediately landed on the shower drain. There were a handful of small, coral-shaped tubes sprouting from the divots. Amelia was bent over the protrusions. She had her hands cupped beside them. An unidentifiable liquid dripped from the tubes into her hands. Once she had accumulated a few tablespoons of the substance, she brought her hands to her mouth and ferociously drank the offering. I gasped. Amelia slowly rotated her head towards me, coughing and gagging as she did. Her eyes were lifeless. Her expression was vacant and disconnected. In a raspy, waterlogged voice, she said, "It's such a heavy burden to carry the new blood, Tom." The previously inert tubes rapidly extended from the drain and shot towards me. I screamed. Or, I thought about screaming. It all happened so quickly. Next I remember, I woke up in bed. Amelia vehemently denied any of that happening. She insisted it was a bad dream. Eventually, I actively chose to believe her. It was just easier that way. From that summer on, Amelia's life got progressively better, and mine got progressively worse. She graduated valedictorian of her class, received a full ride to an Ivy League college with plans to study biochemistry. She's on track to becoming the next Surgeon General, my dad would say. Amelia had plenty of close friends to celebrate her continued achievements, as well. Me, on the other hand, barely made it through high school. No close friends to speak of, though I do have a steady girlfriend. We initially bonded over a shared hatred of selection. Over the last year, Hannah's been my rock. We've fantasied about exposing selection to the world at large. Writing up and publishing our own personal accounts of the horrific practice, hoping to get the FBI involved or something. Recent events have forced our hand earlier than we would have liked. 3 weeks ago, Amelia died in a car crash. Her death sent shockwaves through our town's social infrastructure, but not just for the obvious reasons. Everyone's grieving, myself included, but it was something my dad whispered to my grandpa at her funeral that really got me concerned. None of the selected have ever died before. Not to my knowledge, at least. By definition, this shouldn't have happened. Does it break the deal? Does anyone know what to do about this? The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that my dad was right. I didn't personally know all of the recently selected. There's a lot of them and they've scattered themselves throughout the world, but I'd never heard of any of them dying before. Not a single one. "Don't worry," my grandpa replied. "We can fix this. It won't be ideal, but it will work." This morning, I woke up before my alarm rang due to a peculiar sensation. A powerful need to itch the inside curve of my ear. My sleepy fingers traced the appendage until they stumbled upon a firm, pulsing boil that hadn't been there the night before. A fully engorged deer tick was hooked into the flesh of my ear. I found 30 other ticks attached to my body in the bathroom this morning. On my palms, in my hair, over my back. This is only the beginning, too. The solstice is only 6 days away. Please, please help me. I don't want to change. I don't want to go to Glass Harbor. I don't want to carry the new blood.